In the Arcadia Empire, no force compares to the legendary Cardenas clan, the warriors tasked with protecting the peace of these lands for generations. This organization boasts 7 knightly orders, each possessing military power, so devastating that they could easily rival entire nations. The most prestigious among them is the Order of the Golden Dragon, formed exclusively by members of the direct bloodline, who are born with hair and eyes of pure gold. It is whispered that genuine dragon blood flows through their veins, granting them a physical and magical superiority that sets them entirely apart from mere mortals. Here, the young dragons gather to awaken their inherited power, manifesting supernatural abilities known as traits from a very early age. But they are not alone. Members of the collateral lines also train here, desperately trying to push past their own genetic limits in the shadow of the heirs. In the Cardenas training grounds, strength is the only currency, and every recruit must prove their worth in live combat under the cold gaze of their superiors. Among them all, William Cardenas stands out as the undisputed number 1, wielding his sword with a confidence that borders on pure arrogance. William moves with terrifying speed, parrying and counterattacking his own kin with an ease that is almost insulting. No matter how many try, the power of the purest direct line feels like an insurmountable wall for anyone daring to challenge him today. The young noblewoman, bearing the number 2 insignia, is currently on the verge of collapse, unable to keep pace with the sheer brute force William deploys. She cannot believe her eyes. Even by joining forces 2 against 1, they haven't managed to put the number 1 in a single moment of real danger. In the blink of an eye, Dylan Cardenas, the number 4, bites the dust, leaving his partner alone against the monster of the class. The girl grits her teeth and tries to defend herself, but the cold sweat and her trembling hands betray the fact that she already knows how this duel ends. William's technique is like the swipe of a dragon, an elemental force that simply cannot be stopped by a standard apprentice's guard. Panic reflects in her golden eyes as she realizes her defense has been completely bypassed by the trajectory of his next strike. With a decisive slash, William sends the girl flying, ending the combat with a demonstration of power that leaves the entire field in silence. As the number 2 lies defeated on the ground, William looks down at her with evident contempt for her inability to even touch him. He stands there, a chilling reminder of who rules the training grounds, his coldness frightening everyone present. "You're no different from the trash of the collateral line," he spits, comparing his own direct family to the least gifted members of the clan. With an arrogant smirk, William declares himself the only worthy winner of this prestigious selection. Far from the battlefield, in the heights of the Order's headquarters, the situation is being monitored closely by the leadership. Commander Fabian and his officers observe holographic screens, transmitting every detail of the recruit's performance. Fabian, an imposing man with an eye patch, asks directly who they believe deserves the highest marks this year. Bruno, the head instructor, nods in recognition of the talent on display. Although he believes only one candidate truly qualifies for the top spot, everyone assumes he is referring to William Cardenas, who still stands amidst the rubble and defeated recruits. The commander takes it for granted that they are discussing the number 1, noting that the numbers 2 and 4 are also of the clan's pure direct line. The discussion continues as training data flows through the academy's surveillance systems. Bruno points out that almost all collateral members have already been eliminated, making it clear that lineage usually dictates who survives here. Fabian sighs, convinced that the wall of blood is something that simply cannot be overcome regardless of how hard one trains. The ranking system is cruel but effective. The number 1 is logically the strongest warrior among hundreds of recruits. Everything indicates that William will take the top honors. But the head instructor holds a different opinion. "Wait a moment," Bruno intercedes, halting the commander's final decision before it becomes official in the system. Fabian looks at him with curiosity, wondering what could possibly be more impressive than the dominant performance they just witnessed. The instructor reveals that there is a very unusual collateral member who is still standing and has captured his attention. This piques the commander's interest immediately, as it is rare for someone without pure blood to stand out among so many geniuses. Fabian acknowledges that rare talents occasionally appear through sheer effort and determination, but Bruno insists this is different. It isn't just talent. It is an ascent that defies all established logic. If the head instructor says it with such certainty, Fabian knows there must be a powerful reason to consider the boy. The name that leaves his lips is Lanner Carden Scordian, who currently holds the number 25 rank of the promotion. This boy appeared out of nowhere a few days ago, tearing through every opponent and rising from rank. 381 to 25 in record time. Fabian is stunned, thinking it must be a joke, but Bruno invites him to look at the screen to see Lanner's true potential. The surveillance monitors show the most critical moment of the trials. A one-on-one duel between the number 1 and recruit number 25 Lanner Carden Scordian stands before the best in the class, maintaining a calm that feels completely out of place in such a high-tension environment. William Cardenas laughs arrogantly, telling him that coming here alone takes guts, but warns that he has no intention of showing any mercy. Lanner simply responds that it is glad to hear it. Lanner replies, settling into a rock-solid stance as he prepares for the initial exchange of blows. The number 25 recruit meets the golden gaze of his opponent, with his own intense, crimson eyes declaring that if that is the case, he won't find it necessary to hold back in the slightest either. William's golden eyes narrow at the challenge, reflecting an irritation that grows by the second at Lanner's sheer insolence. William's aura explodes with renewed vigor, a physical manifestation of his lineage that pressures the air around them. He snarls at Lanner to raise his sword immediately, lest he spend the rest of his life bitterly regretting the day he was born. Lanner, however, remains unfazed. He notes that William's presence is fundamentally different from the other recruits. The number 1 on his insignia isn't just a vanity prize. With a faint knowing smile, the protagonist decides it is finally time to test his current capabilities against the clan's supposed genius. "Come at me," Lanner provokes, eager to discover just how far he can push this new body, using the combat experience of his past life. The ground shatters beneath William's feet as he launches himself forward with physical power far exceeding what a normal human should be able to endure. He takes to the air in a breathtaking acrobatic leap, descending like a blue meteor aimed directly at Lanner's defensive position. With a deafening war cry, William unleashes a massive overhead strike, intending to shatter Lanner's blade with a single overwhelming impact. The collision triggers an explosion of blue energy that envelops both warriors in the center of the clearing, kicking up a thick shroud of dust. William grits his teeth in shock as the dust clears, seeing his heaviest attack blocked cleanly by the boy he had looked down upon moments ago. With a fluid, circular motion, Lanner parries the trajectory of the strike, causing William's brute force to dissipate harmlessly into the air. Lanner glides around his opponent with startling agility, neutralizing any potential counterattack before William can even process what happened. The number 1 stands frozen, visibly frustrated as his target moves away with a tranquility that wounds his pride more than any physical blow. William stares at his own sword in disbelief, unable to comprehend how a common recruit could resist a direct strike from his superior bloodline. His ego bruised, he swears that his weapon is not so soft as to be defied by a low-ranking apprentice. Wrapping himself in a literal blaze of blue aura, William charges again, screaming at Lanner not to dare play games with him. The two engage in a frantic exchange of slashes and parries that leave trails of blue and white light dancing across the training field. Lanner defends himself with a level of technical efficiency that is nothing short of perfect. Every movement is calculated to minimize the waste of energy and mana. From the observation deck, Bradley notes that Lanner's swordsmanship is profoundly unusual, bearing no resemblance to any style taught within the clan. He is struck by the total absence of unnecessary motion in the boy's fencing, sharing his amazement with the blue-haired woman beside him. Lanner is deflecting every lethal blow with a bare minimum effort required, and the most terrifying part is that he has yet to launch a single offensive strike of his own. Infuriated, William demands at the top of his lungs that Lanner stop scurrying around like an elusive insect. He swings a massive horizontal tilt, fueled by rage, asking if running is the only skill Lanner possesses to survive the duel. Lanner dodges the ferocious arc with a perfect acrobatic flip, landing with a lightness that seems to defy the laws of gravity. His red eyes glow with absolute concentration, systematically analyzing every pattern and every glaring weakness in William's purely aggressive style. The impact of Lanner touching the ground cracks the stone beneath him, proving that even his evasive maneuvers carry significant internal power. William refuses to give him a second of respite, lunging again in a desperate bid to land a hit that will salvage his reputation. He pours his entire reservoir of power into a descending slash wrapped in blue energy, seeking to crush Lanner's annoying resistance once and for all. The metallic clang echoes through the grounds as the weapons clash once more, but Lanner holds his ground, refusing to retreat even a single millimeter. Lanner then leaps back calmly, maintaining a safe distance while William gasps for air after the futile exertion. With a frigid calm, Lanner observes that William does indeed possess considerable strength, a backhanded compliment that only serves to push the number 1 further over the edge. William is now completely out of his mind with rage, accusing Lanner of being nothing but talk since he has spent the entire fight avoiding his best attacks. Lanner fixes him with an impassive stare and, in a serene voice, asks William to finally start fighting. Seriously. The recruit shifts into motion immediately, sprinting at a speed that leaves afterimages of his silhouette in his wake. Bradley watches Lanner's astonishing decision-making, noting that his tactical capacity is at a level no youth should yet possess. William readies his sword one last time, but to an expert like Bradley, it is clear the boy is missing something crucial. Lanner penetrates his opponent's guard range, displaying an instinct forged only on the thin line between life and death. No matter how talented an apprentice may be, there is a limit that cannot be crossed without real experience. William finds himself face to face with Lanner, realizing too late that the boy before him is the true monster. His yellow eyes widen in shock as his attack is countered with insulting ease. William grunts as Lanner's maneuver connects, losing his balance while his opponent rises in one fluid motion. The other recruits watch in stunned silence, unable to believe that number 25 is dominating the best of their year so thoroughly. Lanner lunges back into the fray with renewed determination, his red eyes burning with a fierce intensity as he zeroes in on his target with inhuman precision, leaving a trail of dust as he flashes across the field. The speed of Lanner's movement becomes a blur, utterly confounding his rival's senses. William's teeth grind in pure frustration as he realizes he has lost sight of Lanner in the middle of their exchange. Suddenly, Lanner materializes behind him, demonstrating a divine swiftness that leaves the number 1 completely vulnerable. William let out a desperate cry against the impossible, refusing to accept that a commoner could surpass him in both technique and haste. "You've lost, number 1, Lanner sentences in a voice as cold and calm as a winter tomb, while he readies the final blow. The impact of Lanner's wooden sword against William is so colossal that the ground beneath them spiderwebs with cracks, and the very air seems to vibrate from the sheer force. William is sent hurtling through the sky, trailing a wake of golden energy. Having taken the full weight of the strike, he coughs up blood, his eyes rolling back in his head as he realizes, far too late, the true chasm that exists between their skills. Lanner takes a deep, steadying breath, knowing his former self could never have performed such a feat with this current body. Now that his memories have fully returned, Lanner understands the true scope of his power and his past identity. The phantom image of his previous life as the legendary Sword Emperor, Ren, projects itself behind his youthful frame. Ren was a man who walked the path of the blade without rest, dedicating every fiber of his being to reaching absolute perfection. It was said he had reached a realm where he could split the heavens as easily as one cuts the air. Through his own strength and unyielding will, he had claimed the title of Sword Emperor before the entire world. Even after conquering mountains with a single stroke, Ren remained unsatisfied, seeking an even greater challenge for his art. Finally, he challenged the most powerful being of his era, the Celestial Demon, in a duel that would decide the fate of all. The battle between the two colossi raged for countless days, pushing their physical and mental endurance to superhuman levels, permanently altering the very landscape of the region. In the final stretch of that legendary battle, both contenders were at the absolute limit of their strength, their bodies shattered and their mana depleted. Under a blood-red moon, the two warriors faced off in a clearing devastated by their own power. Ren, wounded and exhausted, could not fathom why his swordsmanship, which he considered perfect, could not finish his adversary. The Celestial Demon stood before him with a mocking smile, asking why Ren's sword could no longer even graze him. "These are just the basics," the demon mocked, belittling the technique Ren had spent a lifetime perfecting. He explained that Ren had merely swung his sword without ever truly grasping its essential nature, claiming that Ren wielded his weapon only for the sake of his own life. It was that very selfishness that had cost him the victory. Ren listened with bitterness. To be told he lacked the basics was a mundane insult for someone of his status. Yet the demon recognized that for a stray dog, Ren had lasted far longer than expected, promising to show him respect in his final moments. The demon bid him farewell. "Go in peace, man who was once called the Sword Emperor." As his life ebbed away under that crimson moon, Ren watched everything he had built end with terrifying finality. Lying on the cracked earth, he closed his eyes as his legend faded. His final thoughts were desperate prayers for one more chance, one more life, where his sword could finally reach his enemy. He reached a bloodied hand toward the moon, wondering if in another life he could master what was now elusive. Thus, the legend of the Sword Emperor Ren ended in total defeat. But in that same instant, something shifted. A new legend was about to begin in a place no one could have imagined. Lanner wakes up with a start, his heart racing and his breath hitched after the vivid vision of his past death. He sits up awkwardly in the middle of the training field, struggling to distinguish reality from the memories of the Sword Emperor. "That dream again," Lanner whispers to himself, rubbing his forehead. Recruit 133, a youth with ash-brown hair and an arrogant sneer, approaches Lanner with a mocking smile alongside several companions. Lanner perceives a subtle change within himself, something strangely familiar, yet out of place in his current body. Suddenly, Recruit 133 lunges with a punch, shouting that they should pick up right where they left off. In an instant of absolute concentration, Lanner's red eye fixes on the incoming attack with surgical precision. With astounding fluidity, Lanner blocks the blow using his forearm, leaving Recruit 133 completely exposed. The aggressor stands stupefied, unable to believe Lanner could react with such speed. The surrounding recruits watch with wide eyes, murmuring in disbelief at the block they just witnessed. Lanner gazes at his own hand in surprise, realizing his reflexes acted entirely on their own. The sensation of power emanating from his body is unlike anything he has felt in this new life. Recruit 133 stumbles back, his face contorted with rage and the stinging humiliation of being so effortlessly repelled. Easily consumed by fury, the recruit grabbed his wooden sword and lunged at Leonard once more in a desperate attack. "Don't get cocky!" Rugil, Recruit 183, roared as he delivered a fierce vertical slash intended to crush his opponent. But Leonard Cardenas Corleones moved with an agility no one expected, dodging the strike with total ease. Dylan Cardenas stood frozen, his eyes wide with disbelief as he watched his attack fail. Lon felt his body moving on pure instinct, as if he knew every single opening in his enemy's defense. As his opponent lost his balance, Lan positioned himself for a lethal counterattack. A blunt blow connected, sending Dylan straight to the ground, surrounded by an aura of shock and defeat. Lon walked away calmly, feeling something beyond his own will guiding his limbs. The other recruits, bearing numbers 257 and 329 on their chests, screamed in horror at seeing their comrade fall so quickly. Lan stopped and looked at them with a cold intensity, appearing to be a completely different person than the one they knew. Fear took hold of the two recruits, who couldn't believe the strength being displayed by the clan's pariah. Dylan tried to pull himself up, but the blow had left him completely dazed and breathless. Desperate, the other two attackers threw themselves at Leonard at the same time, hoping to bring him down through numerical superiority. Leonard watched them come, and suddenly something clicked in his mind. His red eyes glowed with a new determination. "I remember everything," Leonard whispered as he drew his sword with flawless technique. With a fluid movement, he intercepted the combined attack and forced them back with a forceful impact. Leonard leaped through the air and delivered a descending kick directly to the face of Recruit 9. The impact was brutal, slamming the boy into the ground and kicking up a cloud of dust and debris. Silence fell over the area as Leonard observed his defeated aggressors on the floor. He remained pensive, realizing that the strange dream haunting him wasn't just a fantasy. The image of Ren, the Sword Emperor, fighting under a crimson moon, returned to his memory with total clarity. That dream used to torment him and hindered his training, but now everything made sense. Leonard understood that the lives and deaths of the man in his dreams were actually his own memories. He accepted his true identity. He was the reincarnation of Ren, the legendary Sword Emperor from another world. Though it was hard to process, the evidence of his own skills confirmed it. Reincarnation was real. He wondered if the desperate wish he made at the moment of his death was what brought him to this new body. Suddenly, a pang of pain shot through his arm, snapping him back to reality. His current body was weak, aching even after moving the sword just a few times. Leonard looked at his hand and noticed that this body had been trained entirely incorrectly before his arrival. With the wisdom of his past life, he knew he had to start strengthening himself the right way immediately. Under the moonlight, he swore to use his memories and skills to become as strong as possible. He was determined to achieve what Ren could not, pushing past his own limits. With a gaze full of ambition, he set out to surpass his past self and become the best. The scene shifted to the Cardenas clan training grounds, now wrapped in an aura of solemnity. William Cardenas, the clan's number 1, rested on the heights while listening to reports from his subordinates. A recruit marked with number 5 approached him, reporting that 3 of their forces had been put out of commission. The informant explained that the 3 had been defeated in a humiliating fashion by a single person. William listened with curiosity to the name of the one responsible for such a feat. Occurring in an instant, with a demanding tone, the leader asked for the identification numbers of those who had bitten the dust. "They were 329, 257, and 133, the subordinate replied seriously. Another present showed disbelief, as those recruits held considerably high ranks. Concern showed on his face, as he contemplated how this new player could alter the balance of power. William narrowed his eyes, analyzing the situation with a calculating and dangerous look. With a sudden burst, he charged his sword with electric mana and warned them to watch their words. He would not allow anyone to disturb his peace. William Cardenas watched from the shadows, analyzing the report on recruit number 381. He wondered with an arrogant smile if the boy would truly be someone worthy of being used by him. In a distant memory, a mysterious figure offered one last piece of advice to Ren before the end, explaining that his greatest mistake was trying to reach the peak too late, while neglecting his internal power foundations. The key to everything lay in the balance of the 5 elements and cementing that foundation during youth. If Ren had understood that sooner, the result of his final battle would have been entirely different. Back in the present, Lon meditated surrounded by a blue aura, conscious that he had a second chance. Now that he was young again, he planned to build that foundation of energy he had so desperately lacked in the past. Mana began to swirl violently around his chest, responding to his will. Gradually, he molded his new body to be capable of sustaining and channeling vast amounts of energy. "I did it," he murmured, feeling his strength flow through his veins once more with startling clarity. Despite having been the best under the heavens, he remembered how much he had suffered at this age due to a lack of internal power. A banner of the Cardenas clan fluttered in the wind, symbolizing the lineage that Leonard must now navigate. In the great dining hall, recruits gathered to recharge their energy after an intense day. Leonard enjoyed his meal, thinking that a growing warrior needs a balanced diet to be invincible. Suddenly, a massive shadow loomed over him. Someone had come looking for recruit number 381. It was a sturdy, robust man who had already heard about the beating Leonard handed out the previous day. The stranger sat down with him, surprised to see the young man's hearty appetite. The massive figure looms over Leonard, first addressing him by his old rank. Leonard immediately corrects him, his voice steady despite the man's intimidating presence. The stranger introduces himself as Danor, proudly displaying his new status as the clan's number 7. He boasts about his recent promotion, explaining that he secured the rank by teaching the previous holder a brutal lesson. With an air of arrogance, Danor explains the law of the land. In this clan, if you want to climb the ladder, you simply challenge a superior and take their place through force. Leonard remains unfazed by the display of bravado, cutting through the chatter with a cold, piercing question. What do you really want from me? Danor attempts to shift his tone to a friendly one, claiming he only wishes to share valuable intelligence regarding the clan's current state of affairs. He warns Leonard that tensions have reached a breaking point as the Big Three, ranks 1, 2, and 4, are aggressively expanding their factions, threatening to swallow anyone caught in the middle. Showing total indifference to the political drama, Leonard stands up from the table. He mentions with natural ease that he is already well aware of the direct Cardenas heirs, those distinguished by their golden hair and eyes. The robust recruit pales, panicking as he begs Leonard to lower his voice for fear that someone powerful might be eavesdropping on their conversation. Leonard, losing patience, demands that he get straight to the point. Danor is left momentarily stunned, sensing that the boy before him is a completely different person than the weakling he once knew. Gritting his teeth, Danor tries to convince him that survival in the academy depends entirely on one's alliances. He reveals that more than half of the 500 students have already picked a side in this dangerous power game, insisting that the lower ranks must unite to avoid being crushed. He offers Leonard a spot in his nascent team alongside numbers 3 and 9, but without a second of hesitation, Leonard delivers a resounding refusal. He thanks him for the information and walks away, leaving the bewildered number 7 wondering if Leonard had taken a blow to the head. Too many. As sunset paints the academy gardens in hues of orange and gold, Leonard walks alone, but his senses are sharp. He stops abruptly, feeling a presence waiting for him. Firm. Heavy footsteps block his path in a threatening manner, subordinates of William, the number 1 bearing a direct summons from their boss. They inform him that William was impressed to hear that Leonard rejected number 7's invitation and now wants to see him immediately for a personal matter. Leonard realizes that in this place, secrets do not exist, and every path eventually leads back to the top. When the messenger offers a forced alliance on William's behalf, Leonard rejects it flatly, ordering the recruit to get out of his sight. Offended by being treated like a nobody, the aggressor lunges forward, swearing to make Leonard regret his arrogance. A sudden surge of pressure envelops Leonard, but he remains motionless, waiting for the impact. With a fluid movement that defies the eye, he sidesteps the wooden sword, closing the distance in a heartbeat. His physical capability is nothing short of absurd. Channeling his internal power, Leonard projects a menacing silhouette that seems to devour his rival's will to fight. The recruit screams in terror as Leonard shatters his weapon with his bare hands, gliding across the battlefield like a bolt of lightning. The final blow is so rapid and potent that the opponent barely has time to process his defeat before his world goes black. The number 157 insignia flies through the air, symbolizing the fall of another rank. As Leonard stares at the mess at his feet, he is certain that the Cardenas bloodline hides secrets he has yet to uncover. A new challenger, recruit number 98, steps forward, demanding that Leonard stop acting superior and fight him properly. I see, Leonard murmurs as an intense shadow surrounds him. With fierce determination, he launches an attack, promising to give number 98 exactly what he is looking for. The impact echoes loudly against the building walls, and within moments, the fight is over. Leonard has toyed with his rival the entire time, effortlessly stripping the number 98 insignia from the boy's uniform. High above in a window, a masked observer watches the scene with an intrigued smile, fascinated by the strength Leonard had been hiding. Leonard tilts his head slightly toward the window, detecting the gaze even from that great distance. The observer is revealed to be Saul, the overseer in charge of monitoring the apprentices. Saul finishes his report with a grin, realizing this round of training will be full of surprises. As Leonard walks away, now officially holding rank 98, panic spreads through the hallways. A messenger runs frantically, shouting that William has ordered the interception of the new number.
98. Watching the chaos from a distance is Verita Cardenas.
The noble rank 2, a young woman with long golden hair and eyes that radiate intelligence. She confirms the rumors of the incredible boy are true as she looks at William's defeated subordinates scattered across the ground. Another recruit is sent flying through the air by a devastating high kick from Leonard, who continues his advance without stopping. The fallen opponent tries one last time to demand Leonard join their squad, but Leonard simply prepares to settle the matter for good. With a swift upward motion, he breaks the defense of recruit number 25, launching him into the air and snatching the insignia from his chest. Before he even hits the ground, before the recruit could even hit the dirt, Leonard snatched the emblem from the air. "I'll be taking this," he stated flatly, leaving the former number 25 writhing on the ground in total humiliation. As the dust settled, Verita Cardenas approached with an elegant stride, offering her congratulations on his meteoric rise to rank. 25 Leonard met her with a wary gaze, but she remained unperturbed, explaining that she possessed a special vision that allowed her to see far beyond the surface. Through her unique ability, Verita observed Leonard's peculiar physical constitution and the rhythmic flow of golden energy coursing through his veins. She gestured toward the number 25 insignia Leonard held firmly. Recognizing his undeniable talent, Leonard realized then that she possessed clairvoyance, the mind's eye, trait so exceedingly rare and valuable that it justified her position as the clan's number 2. Curiosity gleaming in her eyes, Verita questioned why he so stubbornly avoided teamwork, pointing out that the upcoming joint training would be impossible to survive alone. The conversation was abruptly cut short by the cold intervention of William Cardenas. His towering figure dominated the scene as he faced Verita, reproaching her with disdain for leaking strategic information regarding the clan's direct bloodline. Beneath William's heavy boot, the defeated recruit groaned in agony, unable to offer the slightest resistance. The number 1 openly mocked his subordinates, calling them trash for failing at such a simple task as restraining a single man. Leonard analyzed the newcomer, recognizing that the pressure emanating from William was a tangible, lethal threat. Yet Leonard stood his ground, refusing to be intimidated by the highest-ranked apprentice. As their eyes locked in a silent clash of wills, William ironically remarked that the new recruit had taken quite a long time to show his face. Without a hint of fear, Leonard asserted that he still had plenty of strength left and challenged William to settle things right then and there. A vein throbbed in William's forehead at the insolence, and he hissed a warning for the boy to watch his tongue and remember exactly who he was addressing. The tension was shattered by Verita's sudden, ringing laughter. She looked at Leonard with newfound admiration, noting that no one had ever dared to speak to the number 1 with such raw defiance. She suggested they call it a day, reminding them that the real training began tomorrow and that Leonard clearly had no interest in joining a faction. William decided to withdraw for the moment, claiming he had only come down to personally verify the worth of the new number 25. Before departing, he left a final malicious warning. Leonard should make sure he didn't live to regret provoking him. Leonard accepted the temporary truce with a calm demeanor, his crimson eyes fixed on the back of the man who ruled the clan. He knew the Direct Line's plan was to force them into premature factions, but he had his own path to walk. As the sun began to rise the following day, the air felt heavy with anticipation for the joint training session. In the depths of the forest, Bruno, the stern head instructor, gathered his assistants for a situational report. He was informed that while the other recruits had formed groups, one individual was causing an unprecedented problem. Recruit 25, Leonard Cardenas Corleone, insisted on participating entirely alone. The training was a test of pure survival in the vast, treacherous Cardenas Great Forest, where they were expected to hunt, forage, and protect their insignias from theft. Most had flocked to the Big Four. Squad A was a massive force of 100 recruits under William. Squad B followed the analytical Verita. Squad C was led by a blue-haired girl representing the non-direct lines. And Squad D was commanded by the manipulative strategist, Dylan Cardenas. Even the outcasts had formed a desperate Squad E. However, Leonard stood as the sole member of Squad F, packing his bag with a serenity that seemed otherworldly. Bruno approached him, baffled by the meager supplies. Just water and a few crackers, but Leonard simply replied that self-sufficiency was the point. He knew the exercise would inevitably devolve into a bloodbath of stolen insignias. Dylan Cardenas interrupted the exchange, wearing a mask of faux concern as he warned Leonard that going solo was a death sentence. He offered him a place in his squad, but Leonard immediately detected the predatory vibe of a snake looking for a pawn. Without even looking his way, Leonard told him to get lost, making it clear he saw right through Dylan's attempt to use and discard him. When Leonard refused to explain his motives for going solo, Dylan's mask finally crumbled. His face twisted in fury as he muttered that he finally understood why William hated him so much. With a false, chilling smile, Dylan decided that if Leonard wouldn't listen to reason, he would have to be convinced through force. In a heartbeat, the atmosphere shifted as Dylan prepared to strike. Dylan lunged at him with a speed that would have overwhelmed any ordinary recruit. Drawing his sword, he roared at Leonard to join his squad as he unleashed a heavy horizontal slash. The steel whistled, passing within millimeters of Leonard's skin, but the boy moved with surgical precision, avoiding the impact with effortless grace. Dylan stood stunned, His attack, which he deemed infallible, hadn't managed to singe a single hair on Leonard's head. Utilizing an unusual rhythmic footwork, Leonard glided across the ground, leaving Dylan completely disoriented. With a sharp, sudden movement, Leonard exploited a gap in the defense and connected with a blow that shattered his opponent's balance. Panic seized Dylan. He hadn't felt even a spark of bloodlust or aggression in Leonard's movements. Yet he found himself eating dirt in the most humiliating fashion possible, right in front of all the onlookers. Before Leonard could continue his trek, a heavy hand clamped firmly onto his shoulder, bringing him to a halt. It was Bruno. Though the instructor recognized the boy's immense talent, he warned him that this skirmish was not the actual exercise yet, though he granted Leonard permission to set out first. Leonard accepted the command with a cold nod, showing no emotion over his victory. Internally, however, he was on high alert. He realized the instructor was a true monster. Leonard hadn't been able to sense the man's presence at all. As he ventured into the great forest, he noted that the terrain held creatures that would have given him trouble even in his past life. The Cardenas clan truly lived up to its reputation as the most powerful on the continent. He was genuinely surprised that at such a young age, these youths were awakening such exceptional talents. For so many geniuses to appear in a single generation, it was clear the Cardenas bloodline held a deep secret, but he had no time for theories. His focus was singular, securing a solid base before anyone else. Meanwhile, back at the command center, Bruno called for a status report on the opening moves of the training exercise. An assistant confirmed that clashes between the groups had begun much earlier than in previous years. William's Squad A had wasted no time searching for a base. Instead, they launched a lightning strike against Squad C. Taken completely by surprise, Squad C was decimated in the blink of an eye, except for number 3, who barely escaped with her life. The rest of her team was wiped off the map. Bruno admitted that William's gambit was perceptive. The instructor knew the number 1 didn't just rely on numbers. William understood that the longer the exercise lasted, the harder it would be to secure supplies for such a large faction. By using his numerical advantage early, he eliminated competition before they could organize. When Bruno inquired about Squads B and D, he learned that Verida and Dylan had already formed an alliance to halt William's momentum, a wise and rapid decision compared to previous classes. Bruno then turned to Instructor Sen for a report on the remaining elements. Sen, with her distinctive blue hair, stood at attention, though she hesitated when she reached the subject of recruit number 25. She didn't even know where to begin. She had been stalking Leonard from the shadows when he discovered a strange cave. The woman froze when Leonard suddenly called out to her, despite her concealment techniques being among the best in the clan. The boy turned around without any haste and told her he had an important question. Her suspicions were confirmed. He had known she was there the entire time. Leonard walked calmly toward the cave, showing zero nervousness about whatever lurked inside. Sen emerged from hiding, demanding to know what he wanted. Leonard noted that the cave already had an owner, but insisted he wanted the spot for the night. With a cold gaze, he asked if the beast inhabiting the cave was a domesticated pet of the Cardenas family. At that exact moment, a terrifying giant direwolf lunged from the darkness, launching a feral attack. Sen explained that it was a trained specimen, but one that was impossible for a lone apprentice to defeat. She stood back to see if Leonard was merely bluffing, ready to intervene if things turned lethal. However, Bruno's voice crackled over the radio from headquarters, ordering her to let him try. This, too, was part of the test. The instructor laid out the challenge. If he could kill it, he could use the cave and its contents as his personal larder. The wolf attacked with a brute force that made the forest floor vibrate. Leonard dodged the leap with fluid agility, commenting that for a pet, the beast moved quite well. However, he had no intention of giving up such a comfortable shelter. The dire wolf recovered and prepared to charge again, its growls deepening as a predatory aura surrounded it. It let out a deafening howl that sent a gale of leaves swirling through the air. Leonard sensed the creature's pure bloodlust, realizing it had lost all reason. Knowing that holding back would only cause trouble for the instructor, he tightened his grip on his sword. With total confidence, he launched himself forward, warning the beast that what was coming would hurt. In a flash of raw power and precision, Leonard intercepted the wolf's mid-air leap before its jaws could snap shut, effortlessly subduing the beast with a level of strength no ordinary recruit should possess. With a single thunderous strike, Leonard slammed the creature against the ground, shattering its aggressive posture in an instant. Instructor Shen stood speechless, watching as Recruit 25 completely dominated the beast without a shred of assistance. She found herself seriously questioning if this was truly the level of strength someone at his stage of training should possess. Ignoring the instructor's shock, Leonard focused on securing the entrance to the cave he had just conquered. Before Sen's incredulous eyes, Leonard commanded the wolf to sit, and the massive beast obeyed as if it were a mere puppy. With a simple gesture, he signaled it to stay still, demonstrating absolute psychological and physical control over the animal. He continued giving it basic orders, making it roll over and treating the fearsome predator like a common household pet. The creature even submissively offered its paw, totally surrendered to Leonard's will. Leonard then turned to Sen and asked if he could take the wolf with him for the remainder of the exercise. Sen hesitated, knowing that someone capable of commanding a dire wolf was a dangerous anomaly, but she finally granted permission, recognizing his taming of the beast as a legitimate personal achievement. However, she imposed strict conditions. He was forbidden from using the animal in direct combat, allowed only to use it for transportation and tracking. Leonard accepted the rules without protest, even as Sen warned him not to let the wolf harm other recruits. Inside, however, he had his own designs. He knew this taming technique would be invaluable for the trials ahead. Deciding it was time for his real training to begin, he gave a clear command to his new furry companion. Upon reaching a fork in the path, Leonard decided it would be more efficient to split up and cover more ground. He tasked the wolf with foraging for food and bringing back anything of interest it found on its trail. Without wasting a second, the animal vanished into the thicket while Leonard continued his own route through the woods. Meanwhile, in a different sector of the forest, William Cardenas was mocking his opponents, asking with a sneer if that was all they had to offer. The number one looked down at the fallen recruits with absolute contempt, lamenting that people so weak carried the clan's blood. With arrogant ease, William tucked away the insignias he had stolen, complaining that he was already running out of room to carry them. He threatened the last man standing, promising to eliminate him permanently the next time their paths crossed. Far from there, the leader of Squad E grit his teeth in frustration, cursing his current predicament. Even by attacking in a coordinated group, they hadn't been able to land a single scratch on William, who had dispatched them without breaking a sweat. The boy in the yellow coat knew all too well that they were merely easy prey in this forest if they didn't change their strategy. Overwhelmed by the burden of leadership, he felt lost and paralyzed. His companions desperately pleaded for direction, knowing that if another strong group appeared, they were finished. The leader tried to compose himself, urging everyone to focus on finding food to survive. However, their hopes died the moment a terrifying silhouette emerged from the undergrowth. The captain turned in pure horror as a massive presence blocked their escape route. A gigantic bear rose onto its hind legs, making it clear that Squad E had just become its next meal. Just as all seemed lost, Leonard appeared from nowhere and lunged at the beast with his sword drawn. The bear let out a feral roar just before being intercepted by Recruit 25's unexpected intervention. The leader of Squad E could hardly believe his eyes, recognizing the boy who had just saved them. With one decisive, powerful movement, Leonard left the enormous beast sprawled on the ground, completely incapacitated. He stood before the group with an indifferent expression, his number 25 tag visible. The squad leader, caught between trauma and confusion, shouted at him, calling him heartless and asking how much more he planned to take from them. Leonard didn't even flinch. To him, the bear wasn't a heroic save, but simply the food that would sustain him for the next few days. As he prepared to walk away, he paused for a second to coldly confirm if the other boy was actually all right. The captain assured him he had no serious injuries, watching in awe as the number 25 resumed his march. Leonard clarified with a chill in his voice that he only intervened because the situation seemed excessively dangerous, adding that his only interest on this island was training to become stronger, not squabbling over insignias. The other recruits reflected on the unnatural speed with which Leonard had climbed the clan's ranks as the leader in the yellow. Jacket bowed his head, admitting he now owed Leonard his life. The leader thanked him sincerely, acknowledging that his intervention prevented their immediate elimination. Leonard was about to retort that saving them hadn't been his intention when a strange vibration cut him short. A thundering noise and a wild presence put the entire group on high alert, unsure of what the forest was about to vomit forth. From the brush emerged the glowing eyes and imposing frame of the dire wolf Leonard had tamed earlier. The beast appeared carrying someone between its massive jaws, sparking absolute panic among the recruits. While the others screamed in terror, Leonard gave a firm, direct order for the creature to sit immediately. The wolf obeyed without hesitation, dropping the unconscious body of the person it had found while tracking. Leonard stepped closer to examine the find, wondering who this defeated soul could be. As Leonard inspected the body the animal had brought back, he discovered it was the leader of Squad C, a young woman bearing the prestigious number 3 insignia. The nearby recruit stood in a state of absolute shock, seeing someone as powerful as the number 3 defeated and handled, like a trophy, was beyond their comprehension. To them, the wolf was a terrifying beast, but Leonard's icy composure and raw power were far more chilling. Leonard turned his attention to a wounded recruit, noting that the marks on him were deep and professional. He mused to himself whether a monster had caused this, or if the top 2 in the ranking had already begun their hunt. The wounded boy, recruit 438, struggled to stand, refusing to give up despite being physically broken. Leonard watched him with a flicker of curiosity, respecting the boy's refusal to quit. Instead of stealing his tag, Leonard tossed the massive carcass of a giant beast he had hunted toward them. "Keep it," he said simply. "This is enough to feed all of you." The recruits were stunned by the unexpected gift, but Lannard merely advised them not to become so obsessed with the numbers on their chests. Without another word, he turned and vanished into the darkness, followed by the towering white wolf. Later that night, the blue-haired girl from Squad C jolted awake on a blanket. She sat up and scanned the stars, realizing she was in the middle of nowhere in the dead of night. Seeing her arms neatly bandaged, she wondered who on earth would have taken the trouble to heal her. "You're finally awake?" Lannard asked, emerging from the shadows and giving her a heart-stopping fright. He tossed his cloak aside, barely acknowledging her shock. Her instincts kicked in and she launched a lightning-fast kick. But Lannard didn't even flinch, blocking the strike with his forearm as if it were nothing. "I see your legs work well enough," he remarked calmly, suggesting she save her energy and rest properly. She didn't trust him for a second, screaming at him to return her insignia immediately. Lannard met her outburst with a total poker face. When she checked her clothes, she realized her number 3 tag was still pinned exactly where it belonged. Lannard had never touched it. Ignoring her complaints, Lannard walked toward the campfire. She admitted that he had saved her life, but reiterated that she had no intention of surrendering her rank. "I never had any interest in stealing it," Lannard clarified, pulling out a piece of roasted meat and offering it to her. She stared at him in disbelief, wondering if he was serious. They sat together, and Lannard told her that a child shouldn't go hungry, so she had better eat. She began devouring the food as if she hadn't eaten in days while Lannard asked what had happened to Squad C. She went silent for a moment, staring into the flames. When he asked if it was a monster that took them down, she grit her teeth, recalling the humiliation. "It was Squad A," she confessed, her voice heavy with the weight of failure. "They ambushed us and wiped us off the map in a second. It was a massacre. We couldn't do anything." She felt like the worst leader in the world. But Lannard explained that in group combat, it's normal for novices to panic due to lack of experience. He noted that surprise attacks and psychological pressure work wonders on the untrained. Seeing the specific wounds on her arm, Lannard deduced that the number 1, William, was the one who dealt the blow. She confirmed that the man was a monster. As the fire crackled, Lannard analyzed the state of the remaining teams. The girl cursed her luck, furious that she had lost without even landing a decent hit. Lannard smiled inwardly. He liked that despite everything, she still had the spirit to fight. He sensed that with such a drive, she would one day become an impressive warrior. Shifting back to the strategy at hand, Lannard noted that the situation was critical because Squad B would likely fall soon. She suggested seeking an alliance, but Lannard knew William was too meticulous to leave loose ends. He then revealed his plan. They were going directly for Squad A's weak point. She didn't understand, but Lannard already had the number 1 in his sights. In his mind, he visualized the battle as a game of chess where William was the king, the central piece holding the entire structure together. He explained that their strength came from having a leader who made instant, solid decisions. If they could break that pillar, the entire 100-man squad would collapse into chaos. "If you truly want to win, just trust me," Lannard said, looking her in the eye. Processing the proposal, she finally offered a small smile. "In that case, I should call you captain, shouldn't I?" Meanwhile, elsewhere in the forest, a massive column of students from Squad A marched down the main trail. "You're late," a cold voice echoed from the front. William Cardenas walked with practiced arrogance, assuring his subordinates there was no need to rush since time was on their side. Beside him walked another recruit, but William's focus was on the horizon. "It seems we are finally going to see some results," he commented with eerie calm. His golden eyes glowed with intensity as he scanned the thick forest, detecting hidden presences that the others had yet to notice. Suddenly, William raised a fist, signaling his entire squad to halt and prepare for battle immediately. The recruits' boots skidded on the dirt, kicking up dust as they waited for orders. William drew his sword and projected his voice into the trees, warning that while hiding was fine for those who knew their place, surrendering would be the smarter choice. "Stop hiding and come out at once," he commanded. The silence of the forest turning heavy with tension. From the bushes, a large group of ambushers from the other squads emerged. "Wow, you actually noticed us?" one asked mockingly. Dozens of recruits surrounded William's team from all flanks, ready to attempt a coordinated overthrow of the top-ranked leader. William, however, remained unimpressed, flanked by Dylan Cardenas and the rest of his elite guard. Standing alongside William was the young noble number 2. Dylan mocked the attackers, asking with a sneer if the term dog wouldn't fit them better than lions. William surveyed the gathered crowd with absolute disdain, stating that anyone in a position of real power could easily read the petty thoughts of such small fry, and that their plans weren't even worth discussing. With a frigid gaze, William rebuked them for having the audacity to stand before him despite their mediocre skill levels. From behind, the number 2 noble smiled maliciously, commenting that this group was a complete disgrace to the prestige of the Cardenas family. Dylan Cardenas took the opportunity to jeer at the opposing group's leader, asking if he wasn't the one who loved to boast, calling him more of a peacock than a warrior. "This is called dignity, you useless woman," Dylan roared as he lunged forward, formally igniting the hostilities. William, Dylan, and the number 2 moved with lethal speed, sweeping through the first wave of attackers with surgical thrusts. Despite the overwhelming superiority of the leaders, the other squads tried to regroup desperately. Their commanders, screaming for everyone to move and crush Squad A. The defenders struggled to fortify their lines, ordering every unit to hold firm and prevent William from breaking their formation. The combat devolved into a chaotic, bloody melee where the clash of metal and guttural screams filled the forest air. Several attackers were sent flying through the sky by the sheer force of William's strikes. Terror began to take hold of the challengers as they witnessed his power, wondering what kind of terrifying mana trait the man possessed. Even the number 2 noble was fighting at her absolute limit. She realized her opponent was incredibly fast and heavy, her wrists aching just from the strain of blocking his blows. William observed the unfolding chaos with absolute coldness, as if he were simply following a script already written in his mind. What kind of monster is this guy? One of the subordinates shrieked, witnessing the brutality with which William dispatched his foes. A gloved hand tightened, its grip on a sword hilt as William prepared to deliver a finishing blow to the enemy formation. He looked toward Dylan and the number 2, who seemed to have surrounded him. "Did you two really come together just to show me such cheap tricks?" he asked with pure disdain. Dylan Cardenas was gasping for air, completely overwhelmed by the physical and mental pressure William exerted. With a fluid, humiliating movement, William floored Dylan, leaving him out of the fight in the blink of an eye. Seeing what she believed to be a golden opening, the number 2 noble launched an attack from William's rear. "You're totally exposed!" she cried out with false confidence. As she charged, she told herself that even for someone like William, a blind spot was difficult to cover. She could see exactly how his muscles tensed to react, but suddenly, a wave of terror washed over her when she realized William wasn't even trying to dodge. She understood the mortal trap too late. It was a setup from the very beginning. As she realized her mistake, William began to spin with superhuman velocity, unleashing a mana-charged counterattack that illuminated the clearing. He intercepted her rapier with devastating force, blocking the attack effortlessly. "You're better than number 4. At least," William commented dryly. "But you realized your error too late." Their blades clashed with a metallic screech. William mocked her special eyes, telling her they weren't perfect and that, to him, her attacks were laughably slow. He locked his gaze onto her with terrifying intensity, adding that her movements were nothing, like those of number 25, mentioning Leonard with a mix of intrigue. With a surgical slash, William shattered the young noble's defense, and she let out a harrowing cry as she fell defeated beneath his power. As she lay defeated at his feet, her hand clutching desperately at the dry grass of the forest floor, William Cardenas loomed over her. He told her arrogantly that despite her big words, she hadn't amounted to much and should simply admit her defeat. Looking ahead with an icy expression, he proclaimed with total confidence that he would be the sole, absolute winner of the training exercise. "You're jumping to conclusions." A calm voice resonated from the shadows of the trees. Leonard Cardenas Corleone emerged, dragging an unconscious student behind him while Dylan and the number 2 watched from the ground in pure amazement. Leonard, wearing his number 25 tag, walked with a firm and unbothered stride. William froze, paralyzed for a moment by the protagonist's unexpected entrance, before exploding in a fit of rage, demanding to know what the hell he was doing there. Leonard responded with total indifference, stating he wasn't doing anything special. He released the student, who slumped onto the churned earth. "I only came to return the favor for what you did to my squad," he explained with a calm that deeply unsettled William. "Your squad?" William asked with a nervous, hate-filled laugh, shouting that a piece of trash, like him, didn't even have an official team assigned. Leonard stared back with his intense crimson eyes, unmoved by the shouting. "At first I didn't," he confessed in a slow voice that echoed through the clearing. William began to notice a shift in the atmosphere, glancing nervously toward the thickets as he felt the situation slipping from his control for the first time. Suddenly, a human tide of low-ranking students surged from the bushes, charging with fierce determination. Leonard described how the weak and the trash that everyone had despised had risen in an organized revolt. These mediocre students threw themselves into the attack with an overwhelming momentum, their roars filling the air as they swarmed and bypassed the defenses of the elite recruits. The dust had barely settled when Recruit 438 stood tall, triumphantly hoisting a golden point insignia he had just seized. "With this, we are finally ready," he shouted, his voice cracking with genuine joy. He turned to his exhausted squadmates, assuring them that with this bounty, they could survive and win the exercise against all odds. Around him, the low-ranking students broke into boisterous celebration, chanting praises for number 25, the man who had given them a ghost of a chance. Leonard and the blue-haired girl approached the victorious group, causing Recruit 438 to jump in surprise. Leonard offered a cold, brief apology for interrupting their moment of glory before extending an open hand toward the group. He proposed a formal official alliance. Instinctively, the student recoiled, fearing that Leonard intended to strip them of their points by force. He stammered that they were only a small, weak squad, and that joining someone as formidable as Leonard would only serve to slow him down. Leonard exchanged a sharp glance with his blue-haired ally. "I've already told you, do not let yourselves be deceived by those labels," he repeated with a gravity that commanded immediate respect. He explained that since they were all subjected to the same grueling Cardenas training, their growth potential was not as disparate as the rankings suggested. The numbers on their chests were merely identifiers without real worth. Recruit 438 listened in stunned silence, unable to grasp that an elite would view them this way. Leonard closed his eyes for a moment, reminding them firmly that the same blood flowed through all their veins, carrying a latent talent just waiting to be harnessed. He argued that outside of the tiny minority with special traits, the base strength of every recruit was practically identical if they applied themselves. Pointing to the number 3 girl, he revealed she came from a branch, family, and had climbed the ranks, through nothing but an iron will. Then, using himself as living proof, he mentioned his own ascent from rank, 381 to 25, through pure sweat and determination. "Is that not evidence enough that the ranking is a farce?" he asked. He assured them that only a handful of people truly stood above them, and together, they possessed the strength to crush the rest if they set their minds to it. When Recruit 438 nervously insisted their problem was more than just physical strength, Leonard cut him off with a commanding gesture. He stated categorically that the issue was not their combat ability, but their hearts. He stood before the demoralized group and told them that what they truly lacked was the courage to believe in their own potential. With a gaze that seemed to pierce their very souls, he asked if they had ever committed 100% to a goal or fought to their absolute limits, a fist clenched tight, charged with newfound resolution. "If you cannot believe in yourselves, then I will believe in you. I promise you that you can win," Leonard declared. He extended his hand in a solemn gesture of camaraderie, formally inviting their squad to join forces, with Squad F to overthrow the tyrannical number 1. Back in the heat of the current battle, the blue-haired girl led the charge of this massive new alliance. "Forward for number 25 who believed in us." The recruits screamed as they threw themselves into the fray. From atop a high rock, she looked down at William, Dylan, and the number 2, who now appeared cornered by the very trash they had despised. William spat insults at her for debasing herself by leading mediocrities, but Leonard appeared behind her, his presence looming large and imposing. The number 3 girl smiled maliciously, reminding them that Leonard had already defeated her once, catching her best kick with a bare hand as if it were child's play. She warned them that the movements of number 25 were infinitely sharper and more dangerous than any of theirs. William's face turned a deep bruised red from suppressed rage. "I didn't join a loser," she added. "I joined someone whose strength surpasses everything you've ever seen." Nearby, a group of low-rankers managed to topple one of William's lieutenants. "Look," she mocked, "my squad is giving your elites a lesson." In the middle of this chaos, the young noblewoman of rank 2 did something no one expected. She burst into loud, genuine laughter. Dropping to her knees before Leonard, she declared with a smirk that she finally understood the situation. She surrendered voluntarily and requested permission to join Leonard's Squad F. Leonard, then shifted his gaze to Dylan Cardenas, who also hit the dirt, making a pragmatic decision in the face of Leonard's overwhelming momentum. Dylan laughed bitterly, admitting he would rather swear loyalty to Leonard than continue suffering a humiliating defeat at the hands of someone he once looked down upon. William Cardenas stood with his face contorted in humiliation and murderous fury at the mass betrayal of his allies. "Cursed traitors!" he howled, pointing his sword at his former comrades, and asking if they had no pride in their bloodline. Leonard simply reminded him that everyone present shared that same blood and urged him to stop being stubborn and accept his imminent defeat. Standing calm and unperturbed amid the screaming, Leonard watched as the light filtered through the trees. William leveled his blade at him, proposing to seal the fate of squads A, G, and F in a single duel. With eyes burning with hatred, William roared that he would personally show Leonard the enormous gap in their power, demanding he not dare to flee. A confident smile played on Leonard's lips, as he replied quietly that he had planned for this direct confrontation from the very beginning. From the very beginning, Leonard began to unsheath his sword with a fluid, hypnotic motion, coolly remarking that, in truth, he should be the one warning about the vast difference in power between them. Surrounded by trails of golden energy emanating from his stance, Lon prepared for the imminent clash with an expression of absolute serenity, inviting William to take the first step. High above, Bradley watched the training grounds, fully aware that this duel between number 1 and number 25 was effectively the final battle of the entire tournament. Expectations were sky high. Every recruit held their breath to see if William would maintain his throne or if this new talent would deliver the shock of the century. William launched the first strike with raw, bone-crushing force that would have leveled any other opponent. But Leonard stood firm against the pressure. Their swords collided violently, spitting sparks as William demonstrated, exactly why he was the clan's finest with a series of direct, devastating thrusts. Leonard quickly realized that the number one was not just a common thug. Each block sent a jarring vibration through his arms, threatening to shatter his bones. William looked down at him with a mixture of boredom and superiority, pressing an offensive style that left zero room to breathe. Despite the heavy blows, Leonard coldly analyzed his opponent's movements, noting that while they were incredibly powerful, they were also remarkably easy to read. Suddenly, a wave of blue energy surged around William, as he prepared an attack that broke the predictable rhythm of the fight. Leonard's eyes widened in surprise, as he saw an angle of attack that defied the logic of any ordinary apprentice. From a distance, Bradley admitted that the level of this confrontation was exceeding all his initial projections. In the blink of an eye, Leonard dodged a lateral slash. That would have ended the duel right there had he so much as blinked. The knight remained pensive, seeing a recruit without special traits hold his own against. The number one was a sight rarely witnessed. William wasn't just relying on muscle. Leonard felt an invisible force reinforcing both his enemy's arms and the blade itself. The truth was finally revealed. The number one's trait was telekinesis, an invisible power that made him practically invincible in close-quarters combat. William lunged in a flurry of cuts, using his ability to strike from positions physically impossible for a normal human. Leonard maintained his calm, his red eyes scanning every flow of energy as he prepared for the definitive counter. A blade surged from a blind spot where putting up any defense should have been impossible. But William continued to defy the laws of physics. By concentrating his telekinetic strength, his arms tensed to the limit, releasing a destructive potency that seemed to crack the very air. This was power in its purest state, a force escaping the common sense of traditional warriors. William paused for a moment, genuinely impressed that someone so young had deciphered the nature of his power so quickly. The ground exploded under the weight of invisible pressure as William discharged another sledgehammer. Blow with his sword, he realized then that Leonard hadn't been playing fair either. The number 25 had also been suppressing his true strength. Why did you hide it until now? William roared, fed up with an opponent who refused to bow before his superiority. Leonard met him with an icy intensity, responding that he would provide his answer through the edge of his steel. The clan emblem glowed with a burning light as William reaffirmed himself as the only worthy heir to the family. With an arrogant smile, William decided that a strong rival only made his eventual victory sweeter. Leonard barely managed to evade a lateral tajo that whistled through the wind, forcing him back as the impact against the earth left a deep trench, proof that William hadn't earned his rank by luck alone. As William prepared for his final strike, he warned Leonard not to complain if he ended up gravely injured. Leonard stood perfectly still, inviting him to show once and for all what the pride of the Cardenas clan was truly capable of. William donned his combat mask and enveloped himself in a frigid blue aura, ready to unleash his entire telekinetic arsenal. Internally, Leonard cursed his weakened body. He couldn't afford to draw unwanted attention by using powers that didn't belong to this world. Tightening his grip on his training sword, he decided he would win using only the pure, refined technique he had accumulated in his past life. His eyes shone with a murderous determination. As the air began to vibrate from the sheer pressure of his battle intent, Leonard dropped his stance, creating a whirlwind of dust as he funneled all his energy into a single, explosive movement. He shot forward like a bolt of lightning, weaving through William's invisible attacks in a deadly dance of steel and will. William recognized that number 25 was adept at dodging, but he swore Leonard wouldn't escape his telekinetic web for long. "Try this!" William screamed, unleashing a barrage of cuts that saturated the space around them. The attack struck a nearby trunk, splintering it into 1,000 pieces, but Leonard slid through the gaps, pirouetting through the air, and using the very force of William's wind to position himself at a superior angle. From the shadows, Dylan and the young noblewoman watched open-mouthed, finally realizing why no one could read William's movements before. William had been using his power to hide his true trait from everyone, something Dylan called out as blatant cheating. Yet Leonard moved with supernatural agility, dodging every thrust until the witnesses began to suspect that it was actually the number 25 who was truly concealing his power. Bradley noted with amazement that Leonard was making everything look like a stroke of luck, intentionally preventing William from realizing that he was actually being toyed with. Falling into a trap like a predator stalking its prey, Leonard positioned himself for the final blow while William continued to strike blindly at the air. Exhaustion and rage began to take their toll on the former number one, who could no longer hide his desperation from the eyes of the onlookers. William froze as he realized Leonard had suddenly materialized in his blind spot, ready to end the duel. "You lost, number one," Leonard whispered, his crimson gaze sentencing the current hierarchy of the clan to its end. An explosion of golden light enveloped the two combatants as Leonard discharged all his accumulated force into a single point. The impact was so brutal that William was sent hurtling through the air, unable to offer any resistance against such a magnitude of power. He spat a mouthful of blood upon hitting the ground, processing with horror that he had been decisively defeated by a lower-ranking recruit. Leonard observed his rival's fall with impeccable posture, ensuring the duel had truly reached its conclusion. A dense cloud of smoke and debris rose from the crater where William lay defeated, silencing the entire training field. Lying in the mud, William stared at his broken sword in shattered pride, realizing that he had truly lost. A vision of death loomed over him. A stark reminder that in a real war, Leonard would not have granted him a second chance. Leonard placed the tip of his weapon in front of William's face, marking the final point of this historic confrontation. With a serenity that commanded respect, the new number 25 demonstrated that the Cardenas clan rankings had ceased to make sense. William let out a dry, bitter laugh, finally accepting that he had encountered someone who surpassed him by a wide margin. Before the stunned silence of his companions and the young noblewoman, William formally admitted his defeat to Leonard. The crowd erupted into a deafening clamor as they witnessed the fall of the undefeated number 1 to the mysterious newcomer. Bradley watched the battlefield with profound respect, acknowledging that he never expected to see such refined technique in an apprentice. Surprisingly, William thanked Leonard for opening his eyes, feeling as though he had finally been liberated from the chains of his own arrogance. Leonard was taken aback by William's change in attitude, as the fallen leader seemed to have found a strange peace in his defeat. William recalled the suffocating demands of his father, a burden he had finally managed to escape thanks to this duel. Leonard observed him with an inquisitive look, trying to process the sudden maturity of his former enemy. William made a gesture of respect, closing the chapter of their rivalry with an unprecedented act of humility. Sitting on the ground, he confessed to Leonard that it was a good fight, publicly recognizing his talent. Leonard exhaled a deep sigh of relief, allowing the tension accumulated during the battle to leave his body. Both warriors sealed their new respect with a firm handshake under the incredulous gaze of the other recruits. On the outskirts, the veteran soldiers couldn't believe what they were seeing. The weakest squad had managed to overthrow the elite of Squad A, too. Recruits lamented bitterly, having staked all their hope and prestige on William's victory. Bradley smiled with satisfaction, knowing this unexpected result would shake the foundations of the clan and bring necessary changes. The members of Squad F lifted Leonard onto their shoulders, celebrating the end of the grueling training in high spirits. Dylan and his companion analyzed the results, admitting that the underdog squad had demonstrated a potential no one saw coming. The recruits celebrated having humbled Squad A, proving that even those considered trash could triumph. Bradley reflected on Leonard's maturity, seeing that the boy understood the objective of the training went far beyond mere fighting. The knight gave final instructions to the blue-haired girl to prepare for the survivors' triumphant return, just as an urgent message bearing the seal of the main house arrived, announcing the start of the blood awakening ceremony. Far from the celebrations, Leonard stood beside the giant, snow-white direwolf in the heart of the mountains. The animal let out a plaintive whimper, sensing that Leonard had to leave, and could not take his companion on the next leg of his journey. Leonard gave his wild friend one last look full of affection, thanking the beast for its help before departing. Under the light of the full moon, they shared a moment of tranquility. Leonard gently stroked the animal's fur, promising that he would grow even stronger so they could reunite one day. "I'll get stronger and come back for you," he assured the wolf with a determined smile that reflected his unshakable will. The wolf let out a final parting howl, appearing to understand the words of the youth who had mastered it. As he walked away down the mountain path, Leonard called out to his wild companion to also strive so it could keep up with him in the future. Under the silver light, the silhouette of the wolf stood out atop the rock, marking the end of a crucial stage for the new number 1. Inside the carriage heading back, Leonard and William sat in silence, their ranking positions now totally inverted. A visibly uncomfortable William asked why everyone had decided to crowd into the same transport regardless of rank. The blue-haired girl and the young noblewoman responded cheerfully, making it clear they now considered Leonard their legitimate leader. Dylan watched Leonard with curiosity, impressed by how someone could climb from rank 381 to first in just 1 month, attempting to break the ice. William mentioned he had important information to share about the future of their training. The blue-haired girl teased him, suggesting Leonard's blows had scrambled his head, which sparked William's immediate indignation. Ignoring the jokes, William explained that starting tomorrow, they would receive supplies based on their new standings. The conversation inside the carriage turned solemn as the recruits discussed the upcoming blood awakening ceremony, the pivotal ritual that defines the true potential of every Cardenas. William explained that their lineage possesses a specialized organ that ordinary humans lack, which must be activated through this ceremony. Dylan and the young noblewoman listened intently, finally understanding why their previous training had only scratched The surface of basic combat. As the carriage rolled forward, they delved into how this awakening facilitates a far more advanced and fluid control of mana. Those who successfully navigate the ritual and complete their preliminary preparations earn the elite right to join the prestigious Order of the Young Dragon Knights. Leonard listened with keen interest to the details of this secret order, well aware that such information was strictly guarded from the general public. The young noblewoman added that the order focuses on real-world combat, offering a specialized curriculum designed to push each recruit to their absolute peak. When Leonard asked if these special organs varied from person to person, his companions nodded gravely. Dylan used a magical illustration to show that these organs are known as monocores, each possessing distinct attributes and varying in number. The blue-haired girl noted that while the clan claims to carry dragon blood, no one truly knows if the legend is fact or myth. William intervened to clarify that the fewer cores a person has, the more efficient their training becomes. With an intense look, he boasted of his own single core, a rarity considered the pinnacle of genetic excellence. The young noble laughed, telling Leonard not to let it get to his head, as a single core only appears once every decade. Leonard reflected on this system, noting the striking similarities to the cultivation concepts he had mastered in his past life as the Sword Emperor. The blonde noblewoman theorized about the legendary existence of individuals with 5 cores, corresponding to the 5 fundamental elements. William explained that every additional core doubles the resources required and makes maintaining balance during training an agonizing task. A visualization appeared, showing how efficiency plummets as the number of cores increases, effectively turning multi-core users into lost causes. The prospect of 5 cores sounded terrifying in theory, as it would require 25 times the resources of a single core to develop. William felt a sting of pride when Dylan suggested he hadn't paid enough attention in theory class. Though the girls joked that with William's raw physical power, he hardly needed to worry about books. Leonard, however, thought privately that if his past life techniques functioned in this world, multiple cores might actually be his greatest opportunity for unparalleled power. Dylan admitted that while a pentacore would theoretically be the strongest being alive, gathering the resources to train one was virtually impossible. Leonard decided he would prefer a triple core result, as a single core would draw too much unwanted scrutiny from the clan's high command. Finally, Leonard stood within a majestic hall where the results of his test were revealed to the world. He was a pentacore. The announcement triggered a massive uproar among the witnesses, who lamented that a sword genius had failed to inherit a more useful bloodline talent. Leonard retreated to a private area of the palace, processing the fact that he was now viewed by the clan as a problematic anomaly. He scratched his head in frustration, realizing he had captured everyone's attention, but in a way that complicated his plans. Suddenly, his instincts flared. His crimson eyes caught a rapid movement heading straight for him. With agility bordering on the impossible, Leonard dodged a series of invisible strikes that tore through the floor of the royal hall. He surveyed the rubble at his feet with a self-critical gaze, realizing his reflex demonstration of strength had been a bit excessive. A hand encased in a gray gauntlet and wreathed in a dense vapor of green mana manifested, signaling the end of the brief exchange. Commander Fabian strode through the hall with an overwhelming presence, his crimson cloak sweeping the dust from the floor as he locked eyes with the youth. With a heavy, confident step, the leader of the Dragon Knights approached Leonard, publicly acknowledging the meteoric rise of the former recruit. 21. Fabian analyzed Leonard's stance, marveling at the harmony of his movements and the total absence of a chaotic or aggressive combat aura. Leonard held his training sword firmly, arguing that technique is an art cultivated from within, before it ever manifests physically. Commander Fabian nodded slowly, finding in the boy's words a profound truth that many veteran warriors often forget. Suddenly, a boisterous laugh escaped Fabian as he leaned back, genuinely amused by Leonard's frankness and courage. Leonard observed with a slight bead of sweat on his forehead as the imposing man celebrated his audacity, earning his immediate respect. Fabian formally introduced himself as a sword master, swearing by his name and rank that he would back Leonard's growth within the clan. To the astonishment of those present, the commander granted Leonard the status of a high-grade recruit and promised him preferential treatment. A silver-armored knight approached Fabian to whisper the troubling news regarding the inefficient nature of a pentacore, but Fabian silenced the report with a shout that echoed off the walls with unshakable determination. The commander insisted that raw talent must be supported without reservation, ignoring biological conventions. Fabian's subordinate obeyed, handing Leonard a valuable dimensional bag containing everything necessary for his future missions. Fabian then told Leonard that since he was now a top-tier recruit, his journey was only beginning. How do you think the other high-ranking recruits will react now that a problematic anomaly has the public backing of the Dragon Knight commander? As a high-grade recruit, Leonard earned the rare privilege of choosing his own destiny. Fabian led him to an immense hall filled with shimmering magic portals, each door acting as a gateway to a different, brutal training ground. The commander explained that while the order usually dictates a student's path, based on their perceived skills, Leonard had earned the right to select his own. Without a moment of hesitation, Leonard asked exactly where he could find resources that matched his true potential. Fabian, delighted by the boy's grit, declared that anyone unwilling to walk the path of suffering was unworthy of the name warrior. He pointed toward a specific gate and commanded him to head to Carabagos. This was the most remote island in the Empire, a place completely severed from civilization. Fabian warned him that the environment was so hostile that even newly promoted knights often ended up begging for mercy, as entire zones were essentially demonic realms infested with lethal creatures. Leonard accepted the challenge without blinking, placing his hand on the portal and thanking Fabian for the opportunity. He knew that training 5 cores was considered impossible because no one understood how to manage the balance, but he possessed a secret advantage. His plan was to make the 5 elements flow as one. If he could elevate them all simultaneously, his power would be unstoppable. A golden chance to surpass even the heights of his past life. Crossing the threshold of light, Leonard was momentarily blinded by an intense glare. When his vision cleared, he found himself standing before a dense, whispering jungle. He had arrived at Carabagos. Before he could even take a full step, a voice greeted him from the shadows. It was Bradley, who expressed genuine surprise at Leonard's stealth, admitting he hadn't heard a single sound as the boy approached. Bradley introduced himself as a senior, Knight of the Order of Young Dragons and the supervisor of the island. He guided Leonard away to meet the rest of the group, explaining that while everyone there was an apprentice, he should show a modicum of respect for his seniors, though he subtly hinted that in this lawless place, such formalities mattered little. Bradley clarified the rules. Second-year students were forbidden from harassing rookies, so there was no need to be intimidated. The plan was for Leonard to spend 6 months under Bradley's protection, before transitioning to pure, unassisted practical training. Food and shelter were Leonard's own responsibility. But due to his special status, Bradley assigned him a private cabin and handed over a bag of supplies, advising him to use the spirit stones wisely. When Leonard inquired about the true value of the resources he had been given, Bradley opened the bag and stood frozen in shock. Inside were 3,000 low-grade spirit stones and 100 elixirs for every single attribute, an astronomical amount that even the most elite number 1 recruits rarely saw. It was clear the commander was betting everything on Leonard's success. Bradley took the moment to explain that spirit stones are mana-charged minerals, used to expand one's internal flow. He noted that with this haul, a normal rookie could easily jump 10 levels, and even a pentacore user could likely reach level 5 without much struggle. To provide context, Bradley gave a quick lesson on the classification of warriors, which were divided into 5 main realms, each containing 10 minor stages. The first is the realm of body temperance, focusing on physical conditioning and internal mana expansion. The second is the realm of external strength, where cultivated mana is projected as a battle aura. The third is the realm of transcendence, where a warrior defines their unique, unrepeatable style. The fourth is the realm of the demigod, a state where the spirit surpasses the mind and the will begins to bend reality. Finally, Bradley spoke of the 5th level, the realm of divinity. In this state, one ceases to be human and attains the status of a god. He pointed to an image of a golden-armored warrior standing over a fallen dragon, clarifying that while this is the ultimate peak of power, no one since the founder of the Cardenas clan had ever achieved it. Bradley grew slightly defensive, mentioning that some fools dismissed the founder as a myth, an insult he took personally. Ending the lecture, he ordered Leonard to begin his mana cultivation, immediately by absorbing the energy from the stones. He made it sound simple. Absorb and strengthen before slamming. The cabin door shut and leaving, Leonard alone with his thoughts and his massive hoard of resources. Leonard looked at the spirit stones scattered across the floor, noting that the very air in the cabin was thick with mana. He realized that merely breathing in this place was a form of training. The true challenge wouldn't be finding energy, but something far more complex. Mastering the violent, competing flows of 5 different cores without letting them tear his body apart. The process of absorption was not the challenge itself. Rather, it was something Leonard felt incredibly lucky to revisit. He allowed a small, confident smile to grace his lips as the day came to a close. This was a discipline he had already mastered to perfection in his previous life. As night fell, he remained deeply focused under the moonlight, filtering through his window. Even he was taken aback by the sheer speed of his progress. He wondered if such velocity was natural, even with his prior experience. In just a few hours, he had already surged to the 3rd stage. At this rate, he was convinced he could reach stage 5 within a single day. He lay on the floor to rest for a moment, thinking that with his memories, this training was almost insultingly easy. However, he knew that finishing everything in 24 hours would draw too much attention and raise unnecessary suspicions about his talent. Fabian already considered him a once-in-a-generation genius. He had to be careful with how much he revealed. He decided that if he spent time relearning his old techniques now, he could mask his progress and make it appear more organic. A month and a half passed. Outside the cabin, A group of recruits watched the building with a mix of curiosity and awe. They couldn't believe Leonard had remained secluded for so long without stepping out even once. One of them remarked that he was likely planning to stay, locked away until he reached at least the 5th stage just to survive on the island. Eventually, they grew tired of waiting and decided to go fishing, grumbling that they were wasting their time worrying about a rookie. As they walked, they discussed the scarcity of resources and how they would have to spend their precious spirit stones if they didn't catch anything soon. They laughed as they compared their strength to low-level monsters, admitting that in a place like this, they were practically at the bottom of the food chain. Suddenly, the cabin door creaked open. Leonard finally emerged, letting out a weary sigh. After his long period of reclusivity, he straightened his tie and decided it was time to track down Bradley to demand a real weapon. The scene shifted to an open forest under a brilliant blue sky where the knight received him with a sarcastic question. Bradley asked why on earth he would need a steel sword. Leonard replied simply that he needed to become accustomed to real weight. To the knight, it sounded arrogant for someone who had only just grown slightly stronger to be demanding metal weapons. Without warning, Leonard unleashed a devastating strike that sent stones and dust flying in every direction. Bradley was struck dumb by the boy's sudden display of raw, brutal force. He couldn't believe a Pentacore user had managed to reach the 3rd stage in only a month of training. While admitting the growth was impressive, Bradley released an intimidating red pressure to put Leonard back in his place. He transformed into a dark, looming figure with glowing eyes, warning the apprentice not to grow overconfident over a minor achievement. Leonard was genuinely surprised by his superior's sudden aggression and the sheer weight of his aura. Bradley quickly returned to normal and handed over a sheathed sword, telling him to relax and that it was merely a warning. He advised Leonard not to do anything reckless with it, and Leonard thanked him with a brief bow. Before leaving, the knight reminded him that if he lost or broke the weapon, he would have to pay for it with his valuable spirit stones. Bradley brandished a shimmering stone to emphasize the price, and Leonard signaled that he understood the conditions perfectly. The knight departed, offering Leonard encouragement for the challenges ahead. With a real sword in hand and a map in the other, Leonard prepared for the next phase of his plan. Entering the Forest of Remnants, a place marked as a danger zone on the clan's map, deep within the woods. The local denizens were already stirring, detecting an intruder. A pack of hobgoblins, ranked E2, common monsters in these initial training zones, moved in. Leonard didn't waste time. With a precise movement, he painted the ground with the blood of the first enemy he crossed. He walked calmly among the trees, noting that no matter how clean the cut, the scent of blood would always attract more. Moving with supernatural agility, he left barely a trace on the dry leaves. "This will be quick," he murmured, carving through several monsters with a single, coordinated and unerring slash. Upon their deaths, the creature's life essence materialized into small, glowing gems, valuable spirit stones. Leonard observed how the mana from the monsters' bodies condensed into this fundamental resource for his cultivation. He estimated that collecting 100 low-grade stones a day was a decent start, but it wasn't enough for his ambitions. The Forest of Remnants was essentially a dumping ground for weak, E-rank monsters that had barely survived natural selection. Suddenly, Leonard's instincts flared. He snapped his gaze toward the thicket, alerted by an unusual sound. He caught a different scent, one far more aggressive than that of the hobgoblins. A gnoll, he thought with interest. His hand tightened around his hilt, feeling the vibration of a real threat approaching from the flank. The creature moved swiftly around him, making no effort to hide its bloodlust, seeing Leonard as mere prey. "You're underestimating me far too much," Leonard said with an icy stare as he prepared for the collision. His red eyes glowed with dangerous intensity as he mentally commanded the beast to stop its posturing. A thunderous crash echoed through the clearing as the battle between the young noble and the savage beast formally began. The gnoll, a humanoid beast with the head of a wolf, charged furiously while swinging a massive worn stone axe. The impact of the weapon against the earth sent rocks and dust flying, showcasing the creature's terrifying physical power. Leonard dodged the attack with ease. Leonard moved with an elegance that bordered on insulting, keeping his uniform pristine despite the swirling chaos around him. "Shut up, you mangy mutt," he snapped, his voice a pillar of calm against the monster's increasingly violent snarls. The beast roared in a fit of pique, realizing its first murder-laden strike had failed to find its mark. Leonard blocked the subsequent blow, feeling the heavy vibration travel up his arms. Parrying such an attack required the surgical precision of a master. Using the enemy's own momentum, he leaped over its head, soaring out of the reach of its jagged claws. He decided then to simply evade everything, his eyes scanning the environment and noting how the gnoll's brute force was shattering the very earth beneath its feet. A suspicion began to take root in his mind. This creature's strength was far superior to the common gnolls described in his manuals. In his mental library, he compared the tiers. A goblin was rank E1, and a hobgoblin was rank E2. A standard. Gnoll should be ranked E1, manageable, yet dangerous for an average recruit. But this specimen was deploying physical power and speed that defied basic classification. Leonard remembered that monsters occasionally undergo awakenings during their evolution, becoming lethal variants. This was a rank D3. Leonard let a small smile slip. Things were finally getting interesting, and rather than feel fear, he saw this as the perfect opportunity to test the limits of his new body. He unleashed a sudden surge of blue mana that coated his blade, launching a flurry of high-speed thrusts. He darted forward, exploiting the beast's heavy, sluggish movements to counterattack with ease. "There is no way such a clumsy strike," he murmured, vaulting over the hilt of the stone axe as it slammed into the dirt. "Could even graze me." The knoll struck at empty air with evident desperation. In a heartbeat, Leonard repositioned behind the monster, carving a deep bloody mark across its back. He watched calmly as sparks flew with every clash of steel against the creature's iron-tough hide and stone weapon. Driven into a blind frenzy, the knoll surrounded itself with a crimson aura, preparing one final devastating blow. The heavy stone axe buried itself deep into the ground after the failed strike, and Leonard instantly seized the error. The beast had relied too heavily on its raw power, leaving a perfect opening. With a graceful sweeping motion, Leonard lunged forward, the monster barely able to let out a gasp of shock. His red eyes flared as he evaluated the creature's anatomy for a definitive kill. "You can't protect this," he thought, fixing his gaze on its vulnerable face. With a precise lethal arc of his blade, he brought the knoll down, ending the fierce contest in the blink of an eye. As the forest of remnants regained its heavy silence and the mist swallowed the echoes of battle, Leonard paused to inspect the loot. To his surprise, the creature had left behind a spirit stone of remarkable purity. Holding it, he confirmed it was a medium-grade stone, worth 100 times more than the low-grade ones. As the monster's remains dissolved into the air, he reflected on how rapidly his internal power would grow. If he could find more such foes, satisfied with his work, he withdrew with a firm step. Back at his cabin, a mysterious blue light glowed from within. Leonard sat in meditation, gales of energy swirling around him. He looked at his hands, surprised that he had already reached level 10 of body temperance so quickly. He knew that progressing this much in just a few months would draw dangerous attention, and he needed a way to acquire resources without standing out. Outside, he heard footsteps. 3 months had passed since his seclusion began, and the veteran recruits were complaining about their daily check-ins. One reminded the others that in the Cardenas clan, connections were the only way to survive. Good contact was worth more than a mediocre, noble title. They noted that even the commander had his eye on the rookie. One of the veterans shoved Hayden, a senior student, ordering him to be the one to check on the boy. Hayden approached with a bucket of fish, calling out to see if the kid was still alive, peering through a crack in the wooden door with concern. From the shadows, Leonard watched him, realizing that his superiors were, in their own way, decent people. Staring at Hayden's face through the gap, an idea struck him. If he took on the appearance of a veteran who had been stagnant for 10 years, no one would care about his strength. He sat back down and prepared a technique he hadn't used in an age. Placing his hands on his head, he concentrated his energy to invoke reverse craft, an art of disguise that physically alters the pulses and muscles of the face. His features began to stretch and shift drastically under his own touch. Under the full moon, Leonard found it ironic that he had to hide his face to hide his power. He looked at his hands once more, satisfied that the transformation was complete. Now looking exactly like Hayden, he decided to maintain the ruse for a long while. 3 months later, the scene shifted to the Bone Mountain Swamp, a place of thick fog and peril. Something moved through the vegetation at incredible speed, scattering birds from the water. It was Leonard running through the mire, reminding himself that the key to surviving here was to always erase his presence. He moves with calculated caution, fully aware that this swamp is home to venomous creatures that are experts in the art of the ambush. He perches upon a thick branch while beneath him, lizardmen lurk in the murky darkness. Leonard readies his blade, mentally comparing the scales of these monsters to the beasts he faced before. With a sudden burst of power, he kicks off, the branch shattering under his feet as he launches his assault. He drops directly from the air onto one of the submerged lizardmen. The impact is instantaneous, and the monster is defeated before it can even register his presence. Lon lands firmly on the body of his prey as blood spatters into the stagnant water. He muses that he might have been a bit too loud, as the master of this territory seems to have been roused from its slumber. An enormous lizard man emerges from the mist, brandishing a crude wooden spear. The creature roars, its yellow eyes glowing with a primal fury, ready to defend its domain against the intruder. Leonard blocks the strike effortlessly, noting that while the beast is fast, its movements are predictable and simple. Suddenly, his body erupts with blue energy. He is on the verge of crossing into a new realm of power. Even while maintaining Hayden's face, he realizes he has reached the absolute limit of his current stage. He knows he won't be able to suppress the mana explosion that will accompany his next advancement. So he begins to move through the swamp trees, searching for a place of total isolation where he can release his energy unseen and find shelter from the rain. Leonard eventually stumbles upon what appears to be a hidden cultivation field, tucked away in the thickest part of the wilderness. He freezes, eyes wide at the sight of a plantation of spiritual herbs growing right before the mouth of a cave. These plants absorb mana far more efficiently than any stone, and they are present in incredible quantities. However, the field is not unclaimed. It is watched over by the cave's guardian, a massive and threatening troll. The troll shifts into an alert stance, growling as it senses an outsider trespassing on its land. Leonard hides quickly, realizing that another powerful presence is drawing near. Suddenly, a bolt of lightning strikes from the sky, marking the arrival of a new challenger. A fierce lycanthrope has appeared to directly challenge the troll's authority. The beast moves with staggering speed, weaving through the debris flying through the air. The troll attempts to crush it, but the wolf is wreathed in electricity and proves far too agile to catch. Lan watches in awe as the lycanthrope channels the power of nature into every strike, realizing that even monsters can manipulate the elements if they reach a sufficient level of power. The troll responds by hurling gigantic boulders, controlling tons of earth with sheer brute force. The lycanthrope continues to dodge at the speed of lightning, leaping between the trees as the two monsters collide in an explosion of energy and stone. They roar with a fury that proves neither is willing to cede control of the forest. Realizing this battle will be a long one, Leonard recognizes it as the perfect distraction. Exploiting the chaos, he slips toward the cave entrance while the behemoths are occupied. He reasons that while they tear each other apart outside, he can explore the secrets hidden within. If a troll of that caliber is guarding the entrance, there must be a significant treasure inside. He enters stealthily, noting how the thunderous sounds of the battle outside begin to fade. After advancing only a few meters, the silence becomes absolute, the ideal location for his realm advancement. Suddenly, he stops dead in his tracks as a golden glow illuminates the back of the grotto. Before him stands a legendary tree emanating a warm light filled with pure mana, surrounded by medium-grade spiritual herbs. He wonders if the troll is actually the one cultivating them, but a warrior's sense tells him something is off. The mana is so potent he should have felt it from outside the cave. Extending his hand, he feels a strange vibration in the air, like an invisible wall of energy. Upon contact, a hexagonal pattern shimmers into view, revealing a powerful magical protection seal. He now understands that the barrier is designed to hide this energy from the outside world. The golden tree is a marvel, and Leonard wonders what kind of legendary plant it could be. He approaches one of the golden leaves, marveled by the purity of the mana flowing through it. He knows these are high-grade materials and that the troll likely doesn't even grasp the true value of what it guards. Leonard prepares to begin his advancement, but his instincts flare instantly. The troll has returned to the cave, drenched in blood and wearing an expression of pure hatred. The monster charges at him with a speed he didn't expect from a creature of its size. Because the cave blocks out all sound and mana, Leonard hadn't realized the fight outside had ended. Fortunately, the troll is significantly weakened from its prior combat with the lycanthrope. Leonard notes that the deep wounds on its chest have yet to heal. The infuriated beast lunges, attempting to crush the boy with a single blow, but Leonard unsheaths his sword and prepares for the impact with absolute concentration. The troll strikes the cave entrance, causing a cave-in that blocks the path completely. Leonard smiles calmly. If the monster has sealed the exit, it has only ensured its death at his hands. He readies himself for battle, concentrating his mana as he accepts the challenge. The air in the cave vibrates with the intensity of the energy they are both releasing. Massive boulders crashed against the ground, kicking up thick clouds of dust and debris in every direction. Leonard realized the trow had understood it couldn't match his speed, shifting its tactics to a frenzied barrage of giant rocks intended to corner him. Leonard knew a single direct hit from those projectiles would be fatal. He watched the troll's movements with cold, calculating eyes, hunting for the exact moment to strike. With his red eyes glowing, he decided it was time to end the combat in one blow. He lunged forward with divine speed, leaving a trail of shimmering energy in his wake. His target was the creature's chest, the point where its life force seemed to concentrate. However, the troll let out a guttural roar as a suffocating heat suddenly flooded the cavern. Lan was stunned to see a burst of elemental energy erupt around the monster's body. The rocks that once served as its armor were now burning. A fierce aura of fire enveloped the guardian, transforming it into a far more lethal threat. The trow slammed a flaming fist into the ground, sending out a searing shockwave that melted the surrounding stone, turning the terrain into a molten death trap. Leonard finally understood why the lycanthrope had fallen so quickly. The beast possessed a double attribute, a rarity among monsters. Its skin turned an incandescent orange, and every step it took left a charred footprint on the rocky floor. Leonard retreated, aware that a reckless approach would lead to his demise. The heat was so oppressive he felt as though he might melt just by standing near the beast. He waited with grim patience, watching for the monster to commit to a heavy, clumsy movement. When the troll finally took a long-waited step forward, losing its balance for a fraction of a second, Leonard saw his opening. With a silent cry of determination, he launched himself into a final attack. Moving like a bolt of golden lightning, he dodged the licking flames by mere millimeters, his veins coursing with adrenaline and a power he hadn't felt in years. Positioned before the creature's chest, he declared the end of the battle. Channeling every drop of his mana into his blade, he leaped and delivered a descending thrust with surgical precision. The troll lunged to catch him mid-air, but the boy's speed was superior. The sword sank deep into the center of the monster's chest, severing its mana flow. Lionel felt the steel bite through muscle and pierce the heart, certain the blow was a killing one. However, his eyes widened in horror as he noticed a glowing, reddish crystalline core within the wound. The crystal began to crack, releasing a massive amount of contained thermal energy. Leonard realized the danger too late. The core was about to detonate. A blinding flash consumed his vision as the flames expanded. The explosion erupted at point-blank range, hurling Leonard backward with devastating violence. He slammed into the sacred tree, the impact against the ancient bark knocking the breath from his lungs. He coughed up blood, feeling as though every bone in his body had been shattered by the shockwave. Leonard watched as the flames began to devour the cave's vegetation, knowing that with the entrance blocked by the collapse, the cavern would become an inferno within 5 minutes. Without a moment to lose, he realized his only hope for survival was to break his limits and reach a new realm of power to trigger a physical regeneration. With a supreme effort, Manuel reached out toward the spiritual stones littering the sanctuary floor. "I'm going to do it," he gasped, as a faint radiance began to shroud his broken form. He closed his eyes, feeling the pure mana from the stones filtering into his mangled internal organs. The power of 100 spiritual stones concentrated in his heart, beginning a desperate healing process. Yet, even that vast energy felt insufficient. He crawled across the floor, driven by a primal need to survive, consuming every spiritual herb and medicinal plant in sight to fuel the breakthrough. He sat in a lotus position, surrounded by a swirling vortex of energy that lifted dust and stones into the air. 5 cores of different colors spun rapidly above his head, representing the various attributes of his mana. Leonard breathed deeply as his individual energies began to fuse into one harmonious flow. A blinding light emanated from his chest. It felt as though a new, more powerful heart had been born within him. His wounds knit together instantly and his mana surged. With a vigor he had never known, he had finally shattered the barrier of his realm. The accumulation of power didn't stop there, growing far beyond human control until a colossal manifestation of mana in the form of a dragon loomed behind him, signaling a power that transcended known limits. Leonard remained there, meditating beneath the giant tree that now glowed like a sun. His mana had finally stabilized, marking his ascension to the 3rd level of the realm of external strength. With a dirt-streaked face but a gaze that commanded fear, Leonard realized he had achieved a staggering leap in power. He thought of his higher-ranked companions who had been stuck at level 2 for years, unable to advance even a single step. He stared at his hand, now wrapped in a brilliant blue aura, feeling the mana race through his body faster than ever before. He marveled at how much he had grown in a single instant. Looking up at the massive tree, he wondered how he had survived such a violent explosion in a confined space. As the blinding light receded, he saw a small, glowing fruit hanging from a branch and realized that the overflowing spiritual energy had formed a shield to protect both him and the cave from the pillar of fire. He took the blue fruit in his hand, feeling it vibrate with energy as it fit perfectly in his palm. Realizing the plant had absorbed the ambient mana to save him, he decided to keep the seed to replant it later. With time running out and fearing his comrades would grow suspicious of his absence, Leonard bolted from the cave, sprinting through the ruins at a breakneck speed and unsheathing his sword as he made an explosive leap toward the outside world. Leonard burst out of the cave, sending earth and stone flying in every direction as he landed. He streaked through the forest, leaping through the air with an agility that transcended human limits. As he moved, a confident smirk played on his lips. He realized he had become so powerful that he now had to focus, just to keep his own burgeoning strength under control. In the distance, he spotted the entrance to the training zone. He arrived just in time, catching his breath while draping a massive giant animal hide over his shoulders. He hurriedly straightened his uniform, knowing that if his superiors saw him in such a state, he'd have to invent far more excuses than he cared to give. Suddenly, a metallic clatter made him turn toward the entrance. A group of recruits appeared, and one expressed shock that the practice gates were already open. A boisterous fellow named Ian approached him, full of energy, telling Leonard to call him Senpai from now on. Leonard met the exaggerated enthusiasm with his usual stoic expression, barely tolerating the man's antics. Never one to waste a moment, Leonard asked Ian for a practice duel to get some feedback on his swordsmanship. Ian, caught off guard but brimming with confidence, laughed and accepted, claiming he couldn't turn down a request from his junior. With a condescending look, Ian told him to prepare himself for a lesson in what it truly meant to be a Cardinal's Knight. Ian lunged, thinking he had the initiative, but Leonard was a blur. In a heartbeat, Ian was sent flying, having no idea what had even hit him. He was out cold. Another senior named Gale stepped up, only to bite the dust immediately after. Leonard was unstoppable. The clearing filled with the sharp cracks of wooden swords and gusts of wind from their movements. Leonard dodged and counterattacked multiple opponents simultaneously, as if he were taking a leisurely stroll. Haydn, watching from the sidelines, turned pale. He couldn't comprehend how someone fresh out of basic training possessed such high-level skill. Desperate, Haydn broke the rules and channeled mana into his blade, enveloping it in flames for a full-power strike. Ian roared in fury at Haydn for using mana in a simple practice session. Their comrades rushed toward Leonard, who stood staring at his hand, which was still smoking from the impact. With eerie tranquility, Leonard apologized, claiming his defensive reflexes had simply acted on their own. He looked at his bloodied palm and mused that even though he had blocked with mana, he had still taken damage. Swordsmanship clearly wasn't everything in this world. Despite the wound, he let out a small smile that left the senior knights completely unsettled. When asked why he wasn't angry, Leonard simply replied that it seemed he still had much to learn from them. Holding his blood-stained wooden sword, his gaze remained full of satisfaction. He told them he wanted to keep clashing blades, leaving the seniors frozen in disbelief that the boy still had energy after such a beating. Ian smiled, promising they would visit his cabin every night to practice. The moment was interrupted by a thunderous pounding on the wooden door. Ian returned, but this time he was carrying a heavy rucksack and looked dead serious. He told Leonard that their training plans for the night were cancelled. Leonard opened the door and asked if something grave had happened. Ian, visibly agitated, mentioned that the other two comrades were nowhere to be found, which he found highly suspicious. He explained that a massive upheaval had occurred near the Bone Mountain Swamp, and the entire area was in chaos. Leonard noticed Ian's attire was different. He was geared up for a live combat deployment. Ian shared the rumors. A lycanthrope and a near-demonic level. Troll had fought a territorial war in the heart of the swamp. The troll had been burned alive, and the lycanthrope was found dead, its skin completely flayed. The descriptions of the remains were a portrait of a bloody massacre. Ian stared into the dark woods, muttering that it must have been a nightmare battle. In the distance, a group of knights in red cloaks and heavy armor began mobilizing for the conflict zone. Ian explained to Leonard that they were heading out for a massive cleanup operation, though it was officially being called night training. He told the boy he wasn't ready for such a deployment, and ordered him to stay and rest in the cabin. Before leaving, Ian remembered that Leonard had broken several wooden swords during their practice, so he reached into his gear and handed him 5 decent blades. He admitted they weren't luxury items, but they would keep him armed for more than 5 minutes at a time. Leonard accepted the gift with sincere thanks. Ian gave him a thumbs up and a grin, asking Leonard not to forget them when he became a famous warrior in the future. He issued one final warning: do not go out tonight. With almost every knight on the island occupied at the swamp, any trouble would be beyond what simple swordsmanship could solve. Leonard watched Ian disappear into the night, realizing the incident was serious if the entire order was being mobilized. But he also knew that with everyone distracted, this was his golden opportunity. Throwing on a dark fur cloak, Leonard set off toward his own secret objective. He knew using his disguise technique tonight would be risky, but he moved with bold determination, aware that if anyone stumbled upon his false identity now, the consequences would be dire. Now, any further complications would only result in new headaches that he simply didn't need. Leonard decided that the best course of action was to camouflage, himself using the flayed lycanthrope skin he had acquired, even if the pungent wild scent was deeply unpleasant. With the heavy fur cloak billowing in the wind like a dark omen, Leonard leaped through the trees with incredible agility. He knew that with the majority of the island's guards concentrated at the swamp, he had a free hand to do as he pleased. This was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for unobserved movement. Adjusting his hood to hide his features, he realized it. It was the perfect moment to explore the far reaches of the training grounds, areas that were usually strictly patrolled. His objective was the Owl Plains, a place that appeared grim and desolate under the eerie, reddish glow of the night sky. He moved with phantom-like stealth, noting that the silence was nearly absolute. Yet his instinct screamed at him to stay alert. He felt a gaze from the depths of the fog, a needle-sharp killing intent that seemed to pierce him through from one side to the other. Leonard stood perfectly still, wondering why this hidden presence had not yet committed to an attack. Resuming his walk over the rocky terrain, he couldn't tell if the stalker was being overly cautious or was simply paralyzed by fear, but he grew tired of waiting. Suddenly, a massive creature dropped from the sky, slamming into the ground before him, with a thunderous crash that sent a plume of dust into the air. It was a giant owlbear, a feral behemoth with dark feathers and talons like obsidian blades, ready to shred anything in its path. The beast let out a deafening roar, but rather than flinching, Leonard calmly adjusted his hood and stared it down. You'll be my first challenger of the night, he murmured with a confident smile, thinking the monster was the perfect warm-up for whatever lay ahead. Meanwhile, on another shore of the archipelago, the sun dipped below the horizon as a voice announced their arrival at Carabagos Island. On the beach, a group of hooded figures disembarked from small boats. One of them reported their status, noting that while they had set out with many, 2 had been lost to the treacherous currents during the crossing. These warriors hailed from the kingdom of Kyrgyz and radiated a dangerous, seasoned energy. The leader lamented the losses, explaining that some had failed to master the air currents and were swallowed by the sea. Then, the head of the band stepped forward, the 5th shadow of Kyrgyz, possessing a gaze that could freeze blood even from beneath his hood. He wondered briefly if the heavens had abandoned them at such a critical moment, but he quickly regained his composure and exhaled a rallying cry to his soldiers. He shouted that the deaths of their brothers would not be in vain, and that their mission for the fatherland must be fulfilled at any cost. They were the feared order of Shadow Knights. A gloved hand gripped an orb pulsing with purple, magical energy as the leader issued the final command. They were to capture the apprentice knights of the Cardenas clan alive. The Shadow Knights leaped into action, drawing their blades with a ferocity that suggested they would show no mercy, even to children, in their quest to unearth the secrets of the Cardenas bloodline. The landscape turned arid and desolate as the wind howled, whipping up clouds of dust over the scorched earth. The rapid pounding of feet left deep imprints in the dry sand as one of the Shadow Knights cursed his luck. In the chaos of the landing, he had become separated from his unit and was now consumed by a cold, biting fear. He wondered how many high-ranking monsters this island truly held. Finding himself barely able to fend them off, he screamed for his captain as he found himself encircled by feral shadows in the mist. Another hooded invader continued his sprint deeper into the interior, questioning what the Cardenas were thinking by keeping their young in such a hellscape. However, he noticed something strange. As he moved further inland, the monsters seemed to grow weaker. In this particular plane, nothing had appeared that truly placed his life in jeopardy. A tactical map in his mind detailed the invasion force's progress. An authoritative voice whispered that once the infiltration was complete, nothing would stop the execution of their master plan. Deep in the woods, a hooded assassin detected the presence of an owlbear. Though he recognized it as a formidable beast, he was fully confident in his ability to eliminate it. He landed lightly in the clearing, sword drawn and ready, but he stopped dead in his tracks. The assassin stood in total shock. The massive owlbear was already dead, struck down before he could even draw near. Standing over the beast's carcass, the assassin scanned his surroundings with growing distrust. Realizing that someone else had anticipated his every move, he lowered his mask slightly, his face a mask of high alert. The air felt heavy, and the uncertainty of who was watching him began to gnaw at his nerves. Examining the area further, he realized the owlbear wasn't the only defeated monster. He concluded that whoever had done this was a true master of combat. Suddenly, a projectile hissed through the air with a metallic whistle. The assassin reacted on pure instinct, blocking the attack and roaring with fury. "Who's there?" A silhouette moved with a speed that defied the human eye. Leonard emerged from the shadows, with a calm that was utterly terrifying to his opponent. The assassin backed away, completely disoriented by the boy's appearance. Leonard observed him coldly and reclaimed the momentum of the encounter. He faced the intruder, asking who the assassin was supposed to be. The man tried to respond, but found himself physically overwhelmed by the sheer pressure emanating from the youth. With his red eyes glowing with predatory intensity, Leonard deduced that the man had been rendered speechless by his presence alone. He decided then and there that he would uncover the intruder's identity through force. Panicked and breathless, the hooded assassin realized he had lost his voice to fear. His eyes reflected a volatile mix of terror and hatred as he drew his sword, which suddenly erupted in a flaming golden aura. The heat of the mana distorted the air, as the enemy unleashed a devastating slash wreathed in fire. The flames from the impact illuminated the clearing, casting long dancing shadows against the trees. But Leonard remained impassive before the onslaught. He parried the strike with an insulting ease, his blade meeting the assassin's with a sharp metallic ring. "Your sword reeks of bloodlust," Leonard remarked with disdain, confirming that his rival never had any intention of being merciful. Sparks showered the ground as their blades locked. Leonard dominated the exchange, blocking every desperate thrust with a precision that left the assassin devoid of any offensive options. The intruder stood aghast. His best attack hadn't left so much as a scratch on the boy. He began to realize with a sinking heart that he was facing a monster inhabiting the body of a child. Leonard moved across the rocky terrain with feline agility, his movements so rapid they left behind phantom trails as he searched for his opponent's weakness. The combat shifted to the rock walls, where they exchanged blows in a deadly dance of blinding speed. The assassin landed what he thought was a solid hit, but Leonard blocked it using an impeccable defensive technique that echoed through the forest with brutal force. Confused by the boy's unnatural resilience, the assassin wondered if he was using some forbidden, magical tool to augment his defense. Leonard maintained the pressure, forcing his foe to retreat constantly, each movement calculated to systematically dismantle the assassin's confidence. Desperate and cornered, the invader unleashed his most powerful technique. A serpent of golden energy erupted from his blade, roaring as it prepared to devour Leonard. The clearing was bathed in a blinding light as the assassin cursed himself for having to reveal his trump card against someone so young. Leonard analyzed the incoming strike with a cold academic gaze. He identified the swordsmanship as something base and venomous, comparing it to the treacherous strike of a viper. With astonishing elegance, he dodged the fangs of energy. "Your technique is crude," he told his opponent. "I can read your movements like an open book." He mocked the man, asking if he had only hunted small prey until now, ridiculing his lack of experience against a true warrior. Despite the humiliation, the assassin flashed a sinister grin. The fight was far from over, and he still had a dirty trick to play. Suddenly, chains of purple energy erupted from the earth, coiling around Leonard in a shark-pound trap designed to immobilize him completely. The assassin jeered, boasting that by sealing both the warrior and his sword simultaneously, victory was inevitable. However, his eyes nearly bulged out of his head when Leonard simply let go of his weapon. He wondered what suicidal impulse had led the boy to disarm himself. Leonard laughed at the assassin's naivety. He clarified that the idea of him being defenseless without a sword was utterly childish. Exploiting the opening, Leonard shattered the magical bindings with pure, raw strength and lunged. He connected with a blow so powerful it left the assassin completely incapacitated, sprawled on the ground with a shattered face and a broken will. The man couldn't process how a child possessed such speed and decisive capacity. As he drifted into unconsciousness, the invader wondered if Leonard had already awakened the legendary and terrifying power of the tainted blood of the Cardenas. The full moon presided over the sky, illuminating the battlefield where Leonard had made it clear who reigned supreme. He walked calmly toward his fallen enemy, who was now bound by his own magical chains. The young apprentice was implacable in victory. He told the assassin his situation was beyond hope. His mana and his body were now useless, and his life rested entirely in Leonard's hands. Filled with resentment, the assassin called him a coward, accusing him of being a Cardenas demon, who used vile powers to mock the pride of a true swordsman. Leonard observed him with a mixture of pity and bewilderment, amazed that the man had the audacity to insult him after attempting a backstab. He pointed to the remains of the magical trap. "Who is the true coward?" he asked ironically, dismissing the accusations as ridiculous. Firmly tied to a tree trunk, the hooded assassin roared with hatred. He deeply despised the Cardenas and swore he would expose the monstrous power he believed Leonard was hiding behind his apprentice facade. Leonard clenched his fist with contained force, watching his captive tremble under the physical and psychological weight of his presence. In a final act of rebellion, the invader dared Leonard to end his life, trying to hide his terror behind a mask of wounded arrogance. However, Leonard showed no emotion. With a fixed gaze and red eyes glowing in the dark, he warned the man that he was no longer the master of his own fate. He didn't even have the right to beg for death. The assassin continued to spit insults, calling Leonard an illegitimate spawn of impure blood. He swore he would yield no information, preferring death over cooperation. Leonard grew pensive at the mention of impure blood, wondering if the man referred specifically to the secrets of the Cardenas lineage. The prisoner insisted that Leonard could not escape the sins etched into his veins. As visions of a red moon and the sinister Cardenas estate flashed through the man's mind, he claimed they were not human. Only monsters could beget such prodigies of brute force generation after generation. A somber smile curved Leonard's lips as he watched from the shadows of his hood. He murmured that the man seemed remarkably well informed and decided it was time to see exactly how deep that knowledge went. Under the moonlight, the interrogation was just beginning. Under the cold brilliance of the full moon, Leonard continued his interrogation of the bound assassin, demanding the truth about the secrets hidden within the Cardenas bloodline. The captive, consumed by fury, spat back that if the founder of the Cardenas family were legitimate, they wouldn't have to hide behind borders or live in such isolation. Leonard met the outburst with a heavy, silent stare, his crimson eyes glowing as he processed the man's words. He asked coolly if the world envied the Cardenas, power so much that they would forsake their knightly honor to kidnap children. Pointing to the shattered magical shackles on the ground, he noted that if they truly wished for a fair fight, they wouldn't rely on such cheap toys. Leonard turned to leave, tossing over his shoulder that even if they uncovered his family's secrets, the invaders would remain nothing more than honorless trash from the frontier. He paused, leaning into the man's face to intimidate him, asking if he truly thought he could face his ancestors with such pathetic pride. Infuriated, the assassin roared, "How dare you insult the name of Kyrgyz?" Leonard smiled inwardly. The fool had just confirmed his origin. The hooded man froze, realizing he had let the name slip, as Lannard's sword began to hum with a vibrant blue aura. Lannard remarked that when a man loses his head, he tends to forget even the most obvious things. The assassin's face twisted into total panic at the sight of the boy's power. Lannard warned him that because his mana circuits were now forced open, he would die soon, but not before Lannard extracted every scrap of information he possessed. The history of Kyrgyz was one of faded glory, a small, forgotten kingdom in the west that had once been known as the Sacred Land of Knights. That was until the Red Dragon Order of the Cardenas swept them from the map in a single, crushing battle centuries ago. That defeat erased Kyrgyz from history, and the world began to recognize the Cardenas lands as the new sacred ground for warriors. Lannard deduced that this incursion was a desperate attempt to reclaim lost glory by unearthing the secrets of his blood, secrets he was also keen to discover. However, the immediate problem was grave. There were enemies on the island who had already reached the realm of transcendence. Sheathing his sword, he decided the best course of action was to report this to Sir Bradley. He looked down at his blade, still shimmering with blue energy, knowing exactly who they were up against. The Shadow Knight Order of Kyrgyz. Lannard analyzed the situation with grim clarity. Most of the people on the island were mere apprentices, and this would turn into a slaughter if they weren't prepared. Without time for long explanations, he decided to use the assassin as living proof that a master-level threat was on the loose. With a sharp, non-lethal strike, he knocked the man unconscious. He murmured that his current power was still just an imitation of his true self, but it would suffice. The marks of his attack remained scorched into a nearby tree, sparking with residual mana. Lannard gathered the magical tools the man carried, slung the unconscious assassin over his shoulder like a sack of grain, and vanished into the woods. Nearby, the scene opened to a camp of white tents nestled under the trees. A group of apprentice knights walked wearily, relieved to finally have a respite from their grueling training. Ian, one of the boys, was visibly on edge, praying that nothing strange would happen that night. His prayers went unanswered when he spotted something on the ground. The apprentices stood frozen in shock as they discovered the body of the Kyrgyz assassin lying in the middle of the path, a glowing blue energy wound pulsing on his chest. Panic erupted as they screamed for Sir Bradley. The senior knight arrived quickly, his expression darkening as he analyzed the body. He identified the wound as a mana blade strike, an advanced technique that only a true swordmaster could perform. Bradley realized the note found beside the body was no lie. It was a forced confession of the attack on the recruits, left there by Lannard to serve as a warning. The note revealed that the Kyrgyz Shadow Knights were coming in force, led by a commander of the Transcendence level. Bradley grit his teeth, knowing that even if they rallied every apprentice on the island, they could barely withstand the coming blow. Without wasting another second, he ordered Ian to sound the general alarm. The island was now in a state of maximum emergency. The piercing sound of the alarm blared through the complex, jolting every knight awake as danger drew near. Recruits scrambled across the grounds, the frantic rhythm of boots hitting wooden floors echoing everywhere. Lannard watched the unfolding chaos with a detached calm, satisfied that Bradley had taken the bait. Bradley stood before the gathered assembly with iron authority, informing them that this was no drill. 30 high-level intruders had infiltrated Karabagos, and at least one was a master. He reminded them of the sheer destructive power of a Transcendence-level warrior, comparing it to the force of Commander Fabian. Men, who were essentially walking natural disasters against whom numbers meant nothing. Bradley gave them a choice. Activate a portal to flee and wait for family reinforcements, or stand and fight. Decide now, Cardenas recruits, he roared, knowing such a real battle occurred only once in a lifetime, assuming they survived to tell the tale. Lannard watched with intrigue, waiting for the group's resolve to manifest. Breaking the silence, a recruit shouted with fierce determination that they would fight. The others joined in a rising chorus, asserting that they too had grown strong and would not fall easily. Lannard admitted to himself that he had misjudged them. Choosing to draw your sword when death is at your throat was no small feat. The battalion of apprentices raised their weapons in unison, rows of archers taking their defensive positions in a massive formation. Bradley smiled thinly, proud of their courage, but issued a final grim warning. A Transcendence-level opponent was a different world entirely. Bradley will seek help from Fabian immediately. As the sun dips behind the jagged mountains, Bradley orders his subordinates to steel their hearts for the coming slaughter. Meanwhile, Lannard navigates a lonely, shadowed trail, expertly exploiting the chaos. He stops before a hidden tunnel he had dug near his bunk, a secret passage he is finally ready to use. He muses that since he is technically still under the protection clause, the order is focused on evacuating him, which provides the perfect cover to act independently. He pulls out the items he stripped from the fallen assassin. Most are shattered, but he notices an enchanted ring that still hums with power. With a sharp flick of mana, the ring's green gem glows intensely, Yet Leonard realizes his own unique heart is blocking external mana interference, making standard magical tools nearly useless to him. The only truly functional item is the signaling device of the Shadow Knight Order. Fortunately, his past life knowledge makes its operation second nature. He dons a pendant set with a green gem, intending to ambush the invaders from the shadows, or use the device as a lure if discovered. He sprints through the forest, a blur of motion leaving a trail of dust across the rocky terrain. His focus is singular. He must watch for the Swordmaster. He will not allow these intruders to treat his territory as a playground. Suddenly, he detects a signal for reinforcements, deducing that the sender isn't the Transcendence level leader. He thinks grimly, "Don't move. I'm on my way," banking on the fact that they don't yet realize he is an enemy. The scene shifts to Lion's Canyon, where an overwhelming pressure of mana hangs in the air. A whirlwind of purple energy erupts, sending boulders tumbling. One of the Kyrgyz assassins is hurled back by a massive impact, cursing the Cardenas scum. Standing before them is a rank A, Manticore, a horrific behemoth with a human face that has them cornered. The beast roars, its scorpion tails lashing out dangerously. The leader of the assassins, desperate and recognizing they are outmatched, orders a retreat, prioritizing the mission over a futile fight. In the midst of their flight, they see a figure approaching through the mist of the massacre and mistake him for a comrade coming to their aid. One of the men peers into the shadows, whispering in terror, "Don't tell me that comrade is..." Before he can finish, Leonard moves like a bolt of blue lightning. Using the power of the stolen device to mask his presence, he annihilates 3 Kyrgyz assassins in the blink of an eye. The last survivor watches in horror, unable to comprehend how a mere child could master their secret technology so effortlessly. With an icy gaze, Leonard mocks the reputation of their organization, revealing that their captured comrade confessed everything without much resistance. Screaming in a fit of fury, the assassin launches a desperate suicidal attack. Leonard remains tranquil as the enemy swears vengeance, calmly preparing to erase the last of the intruders in this sector. With a single surgical slash, Leonard cleaves through the man's defense. A final agonizing cry rings out before the assassin's life is extinguished, his blood staining the earth as his eyes go vacant. "Have you already forgotten what you were facing just a moment ago?" Leonard asks, turning his cold attention toward the true threat. The rank A Manticore emerges fully from the gloom, a nightmarish beast with a lion's body and multiple human and goblinoid faces embedded into its flesh. The monster lets out a roar so powerful it shakes the very air, its bloodshot eyes locked onto the youth. Leonard analyzes the grotesque anatomy, noting the snake-like tail and the various visages forming its hide. Despite the suffocating pressure, he approaches with a calm that borders on the unnatural, intrigued by the bearded human face that appears to be the dominant. Consciousness of the creature, Leonard watches as it exhales a foul, stinking breath while its tails lash like deadly whips. To Leonard's genuine surprise, the beast's human mouth opens, articulating a word heavy with mana. Human. Leonard freezes for a fraction of a second. Encountering a monster capable of human speech is almost unheard of. The creature admits it would likely die if it chose to fight him, acknowledging that the boy possesses a strength superior to its own. However, it warns that it will not die easily, stating its goal is merely to buy time until he arrives. It speaks of a presence infinitely more powerful, the fifth shadow, the Swordmaster whose power exceeds all known limits on the island. The image of the feared enemy master flashes through Leonard's mind. He knows that facing such a man right now would be a death sentence, though he doesn't trust the word of a monster. Leonard recognizes that staying in one place for too long is a dangerous gamble. The Manticore challenges him one last time, inviting him to strike if he does not fear his final destiny. With calculated parsimony, Leonard begins to sheathe his weapons, offering the beast a singular chance to retreat before there is no turning back. With firm steps, he begins to walk away, keeping his senses honed for the inevitable betrayal. Believing Leonard has dropped his guard, the Manticore lunges with a triumphant roar, calling him a fool. Leonard simply sighs. He had already suspected the beast would break its word. In a fluid, continuous motion, he spins, unleashing concentrated bursts of blue mana while moving with superhuman agility. First shot, the head, he murmurs, as the first impact of energy violently jars the monster's skull. The Manticore howls in pain and shock, realizing too late that Leonard had identified its every vulnerability from the start. The youth leaps over the venomous tails, dodging with millimetric precision in midair. Second shot, the lungs, he sentences, as 2 arcs of sapphire energy tore through the Manticore's chest. Leonard delivered a final, decisive strike to its heart, extinguishing the rank A monster's life in a spray of blood. He didn't linger for a second, accelerating his pace as he felt the overwhelming aura of the Swordmaster drawing closer. Executing the next phase of his plan, he tossed the signaling pendant stolen from the first assassin onto the ground, creating a false trail of breadcrumbs, before vanishing into the thickest shadows of the canyon. Seconds after his departure, the fifth shadow of Kyrgyz descended upon the clearing with an impact, that shook the very foundations of the canyon, a whirlwind of emerald green mana swirling around him. The master emerged from the dust cloud, his towering figure exuding a suffocating pressure that seemed to thin the air itself. His glowing eyes locked onto the discarded pendant. He knelt to retrieve it, his jaw tightening with a mixture of grief and fury as he realized he had arrived too late to save his subordinates. Examining the remains of the manticore and his men, he noted with growing unease that the technique used was far too refined for any mere apprentice. Suddenly sensing a flicker in the mana nearby, he spun around, his green energy flaring as he demanded to know who dared to observe him from the dark. Leonard remained hidden behind the jagged rocks, fully aware that a swordmaster possessed a terrifying detection range. Moving with ghostly silence, he retreated toward a safer distance where the master's aura could no longer pin him down. Who would have thought my tunneling skills would save my life? He mused as he used his mana to burrow through the soft earth, escaping through a subterranean path. Back in the crater, the fifth shadow stood alone, momentarily doubting his own refined senses when he found no trace of the intruder he had felt just moments prior. Frustrated, the enemy leader admitted that the mission had encountered unexpected complications, yet as he stood before the makeshift graveyard of his comrades' swords, he swore their sacrifice would not be in vain. He moved forward with renewed determination, convinced that despite this mysterious interference, the most vital part of the Kyrgyz grand plan had already been set in motion. Back on the surface, Leonard's hand punched through the soil in a wooded area far from the canyon. He emerged exhausted but satisfied to have evaded the crushing pressure of a master. His path soon crossed with a dying Cardenas knight who, propped against a mossy rock and gasping for air, squinted to identify the boy. Recognizing Leonard's training uniform, the dying man delivered a devastating report through ragged breaths. A single master had decimated 43 knights in an instant of pure destruction. Worse still, 8 recruits patrolling the sector had been taken alive as prisoners. Rage flickered in Leonard's crimson eyes as he processed the news. He visualized the rescue mission ahead, knowing the enemy sought test subjects rather than corpses. He deduced that moving a large group of captives through such a closed area required a mass teleportation spell, a high-level maneuver that meant the enemies had already achieved their primary objective and were heading for an open space to complete their escape. Following the trail, Leonard stumbled upon Sir Bradley, lying in a pool of his own blood. Rest for a moment, Leonard instructed, ignoring the knight's bewildered stare as the boy began to channel energy to stabilize his wounds. Bradley watched in a daze, floored by the sheer power emanating from a mere apprentice. Realizing no condition to walk, Leonard hoisted the grown man onto his shoulders as if he weighed nothing. He knew that if he didn't act immediately, the Cardenas clan's prestige would crumble into the dust. As he carried strategic vantage point, the rest of the clan's search parties swarmed the forest. Leonard, now masked and hooded to hide his identity, moved like a phantom, skillfully dodging the attacks of his own comrades, who mistook him for a Kyrgyz intruder. Bradley grit his teeth, wondering if this mysterious savior was a repentant survivor of the invasion or something else entirely. Under the mask, Leonard remained hyper-focused, his feet barely touching the ground as he outran the pursuing cavalry. He leaped over a precipice, carrying the heavy knight away from the shouts of the soldiers and the chaos of the woods, navigating a field of discarded blades with the agility of a mountain cat. He used the hilts as platforms to propel himself higher into the air. Finally, he skidded onto the sandy shores of the beach, having reached his intended destination. He set Bradley down firmly, his eyes scanning the horizon for the enemy's final extraction point. Returning to face what was coming, Bradley scrambled to his feet and immediately unsheathed his sword, lunging at Leonard, whom he still perceived as an enemy. Leonard remained perfectly composed. His plan to lure the knights to the coast had worked flawlessly. The senior knight delivered a slash fueled by pure fury. Exhausted from being treated like a helpless package, the boy dodged by a hair's breadth. Coolly analyzing Bradley's technique with the eye of an expert, Bradley froze, suddenly realizing they had reached the shoreline. He had been so consumed by the struggle that he hadn't even noticed the journey. Leonard gazed out toward the sea, ignoring the complaints of the man he had just saved, and issued a grim warning. Bradley needed to save his strength, for the real heavyweight was about to make his entrance. Metallic footsteps soon thundered against the sand as a warrior clad in full-plate armor and a massive cloak emerged from the shadows. Mocking the dogs of the Cardenas, Bradley's face hardened. He recognized this man as the mastermind behind the entire forest disaster. The fifth shadow drew a blade that pulsed with a sinister green aura, declaring that no one would leave the beach alive. He laughed in Bradley's face, asserting that they hadn't come to the island to play and that everything was under their absolute control. Without warning, a colossal pillar of light descended from the heavens, bathing the area in a blinding white radiance. Bradley shielded his eyes, horrified to realize the enemy had just triggered a mass teleportation spell directly above them. The fifth shadow smiled with pure malice, explaining that the spell would take 15 minutes to stabilize, and in the meantime, He would personally see to their entertainment. He launched himself forward with terrifying speed, his green aura illuminating the battlefield. As he toyed with their attempts at resistance, Bradley grit his teeth, straining against the crushing pressure of the enemy's assault while cold sweat beaded on his forehead. From a nearby branch, Leonard observed the duel, mentally urging Bradley to hold on just a little longer. The boy had a clear objective. He was going to recover the captured knights before it was too late. From his high vantage point, he mapped out the enemy camp. Watching the magic circle pulse with power at the center, Leonard infiltrated the camp with phantom-like silence, taking advantage of the fact that the guards were completely preoccupied with the main duel on the beach. Even with his presence suppressed, he noted that not a single soul turned to look his way. His window of opportunity had arrived. Inside one of the tents, the captured knights sat bound and heavily guarded, their eyes widening as a shadow suddenly manifested before them. Leonard focused on the magical shackles holding his allies prisoner. With a precise surge of his sapphire energy, he sliced through the metal chains as if they were made of parchment. One of the knights let out a long sigh of relief, as the oppressive magic finally vanished from his wrists. Confused, they asked if he was a defector from the Kyrgyz group. Unable to understand why a stranger would risk everything to save them, Leonard cut them off mid-sentence, stating he had no time for long-winded explanations. Their only priority was to escape. Immediately, the knights looked at each other, awestruck by the determination and commanding aura radiating from the mysterious youth. Leonard knew the clock was ticking. It wouldn't be long before the fifth shadow sensed something was amiss. Once the problem of the hostages was resolved, Leonard felt a surge of satisfaction. He could finally fight in earnest. He pulled back part of his mask and smiled, knowing the only thing left was to personally handle the enemy leader. As they emerged from the tent, they were met by a horde of hooded assassins ready to kill. Leonard unsheathed his blades, now wreathed in roaring blue flames, and began a systematic massacre among the enemy ranks. "I'm just taking out the trash," he muttered, as his energy slashes tore through the mercenaries without mercy. The enemies fell with agonizing screams, unable to track the sheer velocity of his movements. Meanwhile, back on the sand, the fifth shadow landed a heavy blow that wounded Bradley. The villain mocked the knight's weakness as Bradley spat blood, remarking that while the night had been a decent warm-up, the game was becoming tedious. He declared the time for play over, boasting that his nation, Kyrgyz, would soon stand at the world's peak once again. Suddenly, the fifth shadow stopped dead. He felt a powerful presence approaching, the one who had been systematically dismantling his plans. A silhouette descended from the sky, enveloped in a reddish energy that pierced the twilight. It was Leonard, who crashed into the center of the battlefield with a thunderous impact that commanded everyone's attention. The fifth shadow reacted instantly, releasing a blast of green aura to repel the newcomer. Upon seeing him up close, the villain stood frozen, realized he was facing the fifth shadow of his own nightmares. He mocked Leonard, calling it a disappointment that the one slaughtering his men was a mere brat, and swore to honor his fallen comrades by killing the boy where he stood. Above them, the magic circle glowed with increasing intensity, signaling the teleportation was nearly complete. The villain walked heavily, stepping over the corpses of his subordinates without a trace of remorse. His fury exploded as he looked at the carnage Leonard had wrought, vowing to tear the Cardenas demon limb from limb. He launched a leaping aerial attack, descending with enough green energy to crush the earth. Leonard shifted into a defensive stance, calculating that his opponent was truly in the master realm, stronger than anyone he had faced in this new life. "Die!" the villain shrieked as his sword collided with Leonard's defense in a violent explosion of sparks. The fifth shadow was left in total shock when Leonard blocked the strike, his mind reeling at how a child could possibly manifest. The Mana Blade technique. With an icy, unwavering gaze, Leonard replied that it was none of his business as he prepared his counteroffensive. The fifth shadow bore down with his blade, growling with effort, while Leonard held the line. "Die!" the villain screamed once more. The villain unleashed a massive slash of emerald, energy that set the entire forest, clearing ablaze with a sickly light. Leonard retreated with practiced agility, weaving through the violent arcs of power as his opponent completely lost his composure, screaming that the boy was a demon. Cold and calculating, Leonard realized this was the perfect moment for a counter-offensive. He decided to close the distance instantly, planning to dodge and strike in a single fluid motion to end the duel. However, the fifth shadow's face twisted into a malicious grin. He had successfully lured Leonard exactly where he wanted him. The assassin revealed his true trump card, a lethal poison designed to instantly sever an enemy's mana flow. He boasted that within seconds, Leonard's pulse would stop, leaving him a helpless doll at his mercy. Leonard ignored the threat entirely and lunged. "Thanks for the explanation," he replied with biting sarcasm. The metallic clash of their weapons rang out, but Leonard's movements didn't slow. His unique magical energy seemed to purify the very air, repelling the dark, venomous trails of his opponent's aura. The fifth shadow was aghast. his infallible technique, was failing miserably against a mere child. Leonard understood that his own heart possessed a unique biological immunity, allowing him to ignore toxins that would drop any other warrior. "I already told you, you don't need to know how I do it," Leonard sentenced as sparks showered from their interlocking blades. Desperation took hold of the villain, as his tactical advantage and his poison both proved useless. With bloodshot eyes, the fifth shadow prepared to release every drop of his remaining power, unleashing a literal storm of green mana, serpents that transformed the clearing into a total death zone. Leonard navigated the chaos with superhuman grace, even as his enemy roared in pure, unadulterated frustration. The boy noted that his opponent had finally lost his mind, throwing out desperate attacks without a shred of real strategy. Leonard glided between the energy serpents, mocking the rival's futile attempts to pin him down. With a focused gaze, he gathered a vortex of sapphire energy, ready to wipe away the chaos. The impact was absolute. A brilliant shockwave slammed into the fifth shadow, sending him tumbling backward. Wounded and gasping, the assassin glared at Leonard with visceral hatred, refusing to accept his defeat. Blood streamed down his face, a testament to the physical toll of pushing his dark magic far beyond its breaking point. "Even if it costs my life, I'll drag you down with me," the villain declared, summoning one last colossal projection of mana. The green aura became oppressive, filling the area with dozens of unstable, dangerous manifestations. Leonard watched cautiously, knowing his enemy was betting his very soul on this suicidal gambit. The young warrior shot forward, his raw starting power carving a mark into the earth. He quickly identified the enemy's technique as a complex illusion meant to hide the true point of impact. "Stay calm and strike fast," he commanded himself as he cut through the magical thicket. He began to dismantle the mana serpents with surgical precision, focusing his entire aura onto the razor edge of his blade. With a swift upward swing, he neutralized a hidden threat attacking from his blind spot. The path to his objective was finally clear. "I can reach him," he thought with a surge of contained euphoria. Leonard leaped with his sword raised high for the final, finishing blow. But suddenly a green flash erupted from the earth beneath him. It was a hidden magical trap. Shock-bound. Leonard was intercepted by a violent discharge of energy that left him paralyzed and vulnerable midair. The fifth shadow seized the moment instantly, reaching out and clamping his hand around the boy's throat. He hoisted Leonard into the air, mocking his rookie mistake with a cruel laugh. "Your luck just ran out, brat." "See you in hell," the villain sneered, preparing to deliver the death blow. At that exact critical instant, a voice boomed with terrifying authority. "I'm afraid that's not going to happen." The assassin's arm was suddenly severed, sent flying through the air by an invisible, lightning-fast strike that seemed to cut through space itself. Fabian, commander of the Cardenas, made his entrance with an imposing calm, his red cloak billowing as his frigid gaze dominated the battlefield. The fifth shadow stared at his stump in absolute shock, unable to even scream before the commander's sheer speed. "Who are you?" "Where did you come from?" The villain shrieked, completely overwhelmed. Fabian gave him no room to breathe, attacking again with a powerful upward strike. "This is for the men you killed before I arrived," he declared severely. Coughing from the accumulated strain of the fight, Leonard looked at his enemy with a triumphant smirk. "You really wanted to kill me that badly, huh?" the youth mocked. Leonard explained to the staggering assassin that his obsession with the kill was exactly what blinded him to Fabian's approach. The commander's expression softened as he turned to the boy, his protective side showing. "I'm sorry I arrived late, Leonard," he said sincerely. Fabian observed his nephew's staggering progress with genuine admiration. "You've grown more than I ever imagined in such a short time," he admitted with a smile. Bradley, the Cardenas knight, joined the group, overwhelmed with gratitude to be alive. Fabian acknowledged that Leonard's stubborn resistance was the only reason. They had managed to save Bradley as well. At the absolute limit of his strength, Leonard simply asked for a moment to breathe. It would be enough if he could finally rest. "We'll leave the rest for after I've slept," Leonard whispered. Fabian nodded with genuine warmth, seeing the utter exhaustion etched into the young warrior's face. "Of course, rest as much as you need," he assured him softly. However, the commander's gaze hardened instantly as he turned back to the assassin, who was still clinging to life. "In the meantime," Fabian murmured, "I'll go finish cleaning up the rest of the trash." He prepared to execute the fifth shadow, who was desperately trying to mobilize his remaining mana. "This hasn't ended yet!" the villain gasped, refusing to accept defeat as he floated, wreathed in an unstable and corrupt green aura. Fabian recognized the almost monstrous persistence of his opponent, but his resolve did not waver for a single second. The commander unleashed an overwhelming red spiritual pressure. This is where it all reaches the end. Fabian sentenced with absolute authority. Violent burst of energy slammed into the fifth shadow, the shockwave pushing Leonard back. Suddenly, Fabian's eyes widened in shock. The assassin had stopped defending himself to prepare one final trap. With a demented laugh and bulging eyes, the fifth shadow activated a massive teleportation circle. At the very least, I'll make sure to take you with me, he roared. Leonard watched in horror as the space around them began to distort violently under the weight of prohibited magic. A massive pillar of light erupted, consuming both Leonard and the assassin. The forced teleportation spell completed, making them vanish from the clearing in an instant. A faint trail of blue mana floated in the air, the only evidence of the struggle. Fabian observed the sight with mounting frustration. It was obvious the boy had been taken. Looking at the scorch marks on the ground, he deduced that the destination was uncertain because the magic hadn't fully stabilized. The commander admitted he had lowered his guard, thinking he was the target and not young Leonard. Bradley wondered aloud why they would target Leonard so directly, a boy just starting his path. It seemed the enemy saw in him a threat so significant they were willing to risk anything to remove him from the board. They recalled how Leonard had faced a transcendence-level assassin as a mere apprentice. Bradley confessed he had never seen such terrifying growth in any recruit. A new legend was being born in Cardenas history. Fabian immediately ordered reinforcements from the main house to begin an exhaustive search. They had to find that boy at any cost. Thousands of miles away, Leonard floated adrift on a piece of wreckage in the middle of the vast ocean, barely conscious. He felt the salt spray hitting his face as his strength finally ebbed away. From the deck of a passing ship, someone spotted his form bobbing in the waves. Leonard eventually woke up with a bandage on his cheek. Confused, he felt the constant swaying of the deck and smelled the sharp scent of salt. There was no doubt he was aboard a ship. A red-headed girl smiled, relieved to see him awake after rescuing him. She made it clear she had many questions, as they had literally pulled him from the jaws of death. She introduced herself as Francis, the captain of the vessel Aquamarine, and asked for his name. The boy sat up and responded calmly that he was Leonard, from the Arcadia Empire. They shook hands to finalize the formal introduction, though Francis was taken aback. Arcadia was an absurd distance from their current location. Leonard explained that a magical accident was to blame, vaguely remembering the assassin's face and the blinding light of the spell. Before losing consciousness, Marion, who had been watching from the background with suspicion, approached them. She noted that Leonard's body was far too well-trained for his age, a hallmark of the Cardenas warriors. Leonard didn't deny it, asking if his surname was a problem in these lands. Marion warned Francis that involving themselves with a Cardenas could be extremely dangerous. Suddenly, a sailor burst into the cabin, breathless and panicked, urging Francis to go to the docks immediately. It turned out that Luciano Peterson and his gang were causing havoc at the port. Marion was incensed that they chose this specific day to cause trouble. Francis apologized to Leonard, telling him he could leave whenever he felt recovered and that his gear was ready. Leonard remained alone for a moment, observing his equipment on the table. But before the captain could leave, he stopped her with a single question. "Why did you rescue me?" Francis paused mid-stride, turned with a smile, and told him she simply didn't abandon anyone who needed help. Leonard stared at her, processing her words. He thought to himself that honestly, the one who seemed to need help now was her. The view of the port showed the Aquamarine docked as conflict flared. Francis and Marion walked with determination toward the docks to confront the thugs. Luciano Peterson arrived, escorted by his men, and greeted Francis with an arrogance that invited a blow. "Look who it is," he said with a smug, superior smile. Marion already had her hand on her sword. Luciano wouldn't shut up, telling Francis she should smile more after so much time apart. It was clear he didn't come in peace. He had the face of someone about to drop a heavy demand. Indeed, Luciano told Marion to be quiet, sneering that dogs should remain still while the masters spoke. The level of insolence was staggering, and the fury on Marion's face was absolute. Luciano pushed her aside, claiming this was a matter between leaders. He approached Francis and ordered her directly to stop being stubborn and hand over the Aquamarine once and for all. According to him, the ship was a waste in the hands of a fallen noble like her, and it was a pity that such a vessel was being wasted. Luciano continues his verbal assault, cruelly throwing her father's death in her face, and sneering that she has no right to believe everything belongs to her by birthright alone. It was a royal relic, he claimed, and it was rotting away in her possession. Francis meets his gaze with an icy, unshakable calm, her voice steady as she tells him to get out, swearing that he will never lay a finger on her ship. Luciano's tone shifts instantly, the fake pleasantry vanishing to reveal a jagged threat. He tells her he is offering a generous price and that she would be wise to accept, while he is still feeling charitable. Then the air itself seems to fracture. Before Luciano can even finish his sentence, Leonard materializes out of thin air, and a crimson arc of blood splatters across the wooden planks of the pier. With a terrifying coldness, Leonard turns to Francis and asks, as if inquiring about the weather, if she would mind if he killed this man first just to eliminate the biggest nuisance. Francis and Marion are frozen in total shock, their minds unable to process what had just occurred in the blink of an eye. Luciano is collapsed on the ground, howling in pure agony as he clutches the stump of his amputated arm, screaming curses and calling Leonard a damned bastard. Delirious with pain and humiliated fury, he shrieks at Francis, blaming her for the carnage, before barking a desperate order to his men. Kill Leonard and leave no one alive on the docks. The thugs lunge forward in a desperate wave, but Leonard moves like a bolt of sapphire lightning, carving through the air with an ease that defies logic. With a series of fluid, almost casual movements, he disarms his attackers before they can even register his presence. He doesn't even feel the need to use his sword for all of them. He delivers a crushing kick to one of the men that sends him crashing into the ground with bone-breaking force. The two women stand like statues, watching as Leonard dismantles an entire gang in a matter of seconds. Marion looks down at her own hilt, realizing she didn't even have time to draw. Her weapon before the fight was effectively over. She can only wonder what kind of monster they have pulled from the sea. While Francis begins to understand the true, terrifying weight of the Cardenas name, Leonard concludes the skirmish with one final, decisive strike, leaving the pier littered with defeated men. He approaches the women with total tranquility, the sounds of the ocean returning to the silence of the docks, and asks calmly what they should do with a whimpering Luciano. Leonard notices their wide-eyed stares and asks, with genuine confusion, if he has done something wrong or if something is the matter. Francis shakes her head, finally finding her voice to explain that Luciano isn't just some common thug. He is the illegitimate son of the most powerful figure in all of Atlantis. Leonard grows pensive, realizing he has inadvertently waded into a massive political quagmire. Francis describes the Maritime Union, a territory governed by a strict and ruthless council. Luciano's father, Pablo the Orlando Peterson, is one of the 5 heavyweights who control these seas with an iron fist. Leonard analyzes the situation with his characteristic cold logic. This man is far more problematic than he appeared at first glance. He looks Francis directly in the eye, having already calculated his next move in this strange new land. "Francis, I will act as your bodyguard for a while," Leonard states with a certainty that brooks no argument. He knows that by staying at her side, he can resolve her problems, ensure her protection, and most importantly, gather the information he needs to finally find his way back home. How do you think the Maritime Union will react when they discover that a monster from the Cardenas clan has crippled the son of one of their most feared leaders? After hearing Francis's words, Leonard looked surprised and said, "I'll be your bodyguard." Francis simply smiled warmly and extended her hand toward him. "Of course. You're more than welcome." The two of them shook hands as Francis continued, "I look forward to working with you." Leonard gave a small nod and replied, "The pleasure is mine, Francis." A moment later, his eyes shifted toward the man he had beaten earlier. Looking at him lying there, Leonard asked, "By the way, what should we do about that guy?" "We need to lock him up somewhere." Francis glanced at the unconscious man without showing much concern. "As long as we don't kill him, it's fine. It seems even his own father has already given up on him, so he'll turn a blind eye to this as long as his son's dignity remains intact." "That's a relief then," Leonard answered. Without wasting any more time, Francis stepped forward gracefully and said, "Now please follow me without any worries. There's somewhere I need to go, and I'll be counting on you to guard me." "Understood," Leonard replied before hesitating for a second. "So, should I call you Captain?" Hearing that, Francis let out a soft laugh. "If you're okay with it, Leonard, you can just call me Fran." "All right," Leonard said. "Let's try that again then, Fran." The moment he said her name, Francis suddenly turned toward him with an expression that seemed oddly delighted. "Could you say that one more time?" she asked. Leonard looked slightly confused, but repeated her name once again. At the same time, the other bodyguard standing beside Francis quietly spoke, "My lady." Before long, a massive wave of water rose around them, wrapping the group inside a flowing curtain of shimmering blue. Leonard looked around in amazement as the water moved, like living magic around the streets. "It's quite a sight," he said honestly. "I've never seen anything like this in Arcadia." Francis walked ahead calmly while replying, "This is a trade city. They value appearance above all else. It's all just for show, really. But that's exactly why so many adventurers gather here." As they continued forward, an enormous building soon appeared before them, grand enough to dominate the entire area around it. Its elegant architecture and flowing water designs made it look more like a palace than an office. Francis gestured toward the building and explained, "And this is Bermuda, the management office for Atlantis' adventuring parties." Leonard lifted his head, silently staring at the enormous structure. At that very moment, Francis pointed toward a section inside the building while a calm voice echoed. Nearby, like an official announcement, B07, Aquamarine Party, leader of Aquamarine, Francis Lel von Oceanus. Your credentials have been verified. I will now guide you to Zephyrus. Hall. Zephyrus Hall is a lounge reserved, exclusively for B-rank adventuring parties. Let's go, Francis said as she looked toward Protonese before leading the group inside. The moment Leonard stepped through the entrance, His eyes widened slightly as he took in the luxurious surroundings. The hall was enormous, decorated with polished crystal walls, flowing water ornaments, and elegant chandeliers that reflected shimmering blue light across the room. Every corner of the place radiated wealth and prestige. This place is fancy, Leonard thought to himself while quietly observing everything around him. Is B rank really that high of a level? If that's true, then Aquamarine might be a much larger organization than I first imagined. As Leonard continued looking around, a female staff member approached them with a professional smile. Hello, I'm Clara, the staff member in charge of Zephyrus. Hall, I'll be assisting you with your party registration today. She glanced at the documents in her hands before continuing. With Leonard joining, your official member count will now be 3. Leonard silently reacted to that number in his head, still trying to process the scale of the organization he had just entered. Clara then turned toward him politely. Master Leonard, do you have a specific area of expertise? I need to record the party's overall combat capabilities. Before Leonard could answer, a man sitting nearby suddenly laughed mockingly. Hey Clara, why even bother asking? He's obviously just that young lady's little toy. The atmosphere instantly became tense. Leonard calmly turned toward Francis and asked, Fran, should I take care of him? Francis remained completely composed. No, it's fine. This happens all the time. Hearing that only made the man even angrier. He stood up aggressively and pointed his sword forward. He's just a filler recruit for a tiny 2-person party, right? The very next instant, everyone's eyes widened. Leonard moved so fast that nobody could properly follow his motion. In the blink of an eye, he appeared directly in front of the man, snatched away his sword effortlessly, and placed the blade against the man's neck before he could even react. The entire hall fell silent. Leonard looked straight into the man's terrified eyes and calmly asked, Have you seen enough to judge my skill now? Clara immediately raised her hands nervously. Yes, of course, trying to ease the situation, she quickly continued. By the way, where are you from? The question made Leonard pause for a moment. My origin, he thought silently. Based on Marion's reaction before, I probably shouldn't reveal that I'm from Arcadia, but staying silent would also create suspicion. After thinking for a brief moment, Leonard finally answered, the Kingdom of Kyrgyz. Even as he said it, another thought crossed his mind. It's a shame that's the only country I could think of on the spot. Clara quickly finished writing everything down before smiling once again. And with that, your registration with Aquamarine is complete. Leonard quietly checked the documents he had just received, carefully looking through the details of his official registration. Meanwhile, on the other side, Francis was practically overflowing with excitement. Her eyes sparkled as she happily thought to herself, Finally, my party has a new member. The excitement on her face was so obvious that Leonard ended up noticing it. Fran? He asked curiously. The moment she heard his voice, Francis suddenly snapped back to reality. Oh no, my dignity as a captain. She panicked internally. Almost immediately, she straightened her posture and forced herself to regain a more composed attitude. I see. Good work, she said in an intentionally rough and serious tone. You're officially a member of Aquamarine now, Leonard. After saying that, she quickly turned around to hide her embarrassment before continuing. Anyway, let's call it a day. You're free to go now. Why not do some sightseeing? You seem pretty curious about the city. Then, after pausing for a moment, she added more sincerely, I'm looking forward to working with you. Hearing those words, Leonard gave a faint smile before replying, In that case, could I ask one favor of you? Francis looked genuinely surprised after hearing that request. However, the conversation between the two was never revealed, and the scene shifted away before anyone could hear what Leonard had asked for. The next scene showed Leonard standing outside a house later that day. From inside, a woman's voice called out to him, You must be Leonard. Fran told me all about you. Come on in. Leonard slowly opened the door and stepped inside politely. Thank you. Excuse me. As soon as he entered, the woman sitting inside carefully observed him from head to toe before saying, You don't look like a mage, yet you want to learn about magic? Leonard appeared slightly surprised by the atmosphere of the room. Various objects floated gently through the air as if gravity itself had lost its meaning. Books, cups, papers, and magical tools drifted around effortlessly while the woman controlled everything casually with magic. The sight alone made it obvious that her mastery over mana was on a completely different level. The woman leaned back calmly before saying, Now then, tell me everything. Leonard began explaining his situation in detail, and after quietly listening to his story, the woman nodded slowly. I see, so that's the situation. Yes, Leonard replied seriously. Ever since I was swallowed by space magic, I realized I needed a way to counter it. I have almost no knowledge or understanding of magic at all. The woman continued staring at him carefully, studying his expression as if trying to understand his true intentions. After a brief silence, she finally spoke again. I get it now, she said calmly. So you're not just trying to become a magic swordsman? At that moment, her identity was finally revealed. Her name was Esther, and she was currently a 4th Circle mage of the Atlantis Magic Tower. Esther looked directly at Leonard before calmly explaining, "The best way to learn about magic is to become familiar with it first. I know a method that even a swordsman can understand easily." She then raised a small, glowing spirit stone in her hand, while continuing her explanation. "Aura users increase their mana by absorbing spirit stones, right? This works on the same principle. We're going to make your body adapt to magic by using a spirit stone engraved with a magic circuit." Leonard immediately frowned slightly after hearing that. "But it's not like I actually want to use magic," he replied uncertainly. "Don't worry," Esther answered without hesitation. "Unless you have some extremely unusual constitution, this is the fastest and safest method available." Then she let out a small sigh before adding in a more casual tone, "Besides, this is technically my duty now. As a member of Aquamarine, I'm supposed to guide my juniors properly. Otherwise, that girl will come barging in here again screaming at me." The image of Francis angrily storming into the room was apparently enough to annoy even Esther slightly. Soon after that, the process began. At first, Leonard only felt a strange warmth spreading through his body, but little by little, his condition started worsening. His breathing became heavier, his muscles tightened, and veins began appearing across his arms as the magic circuit reacted violently inside him. Esther immediately noticed that something was wrong. Her calm expression slowly disappeared as she stared at him carefully. "What?" she muttered in confusion. "Any normal person should be able to absorb this circuit easily." Her eyes narrowed as a troubling thought crossed her mind. Could it be this constitution? The very next second, Leonard suddenly let out a loud scream. An enormous surge of energy exploded from his body, far stronger than anything Esther had expected. Waves of power spread violently throughout the entire room, shaking everything around them. Books flew off the shelves, furniture trembled, and all the floating objects inside the room began spinning chaotically in the air as the unstable energy burst outward uncontrollably. Even the atmosphere itself seemed to distort under the pressure of the overwhelming force pouring out of Leonard. Esther watched the scene with shock clearly visible in her eyes. "It's not supposed to be this intense, but," she murmured while carefully observing the mana flow around him. After several tense moments, the violent energy finally began calming down. The storm of mana slowly faded away, and the room gradually returned to silence. The floating objects settled back into place, while the pressure in the air disappeared completely. Only after confirming that the situation had stabilized did Esther step closer to him and asked carefully, "Are you okay, Leonard?" Still breathing heavily from the ordeal, Leonard slowly lifted his head and answered, "Yes." Leonard stood silently for a moment, feeling the magical energy flowing through his body in a completely different way than before. As he examined the magic circuit internally, a shocking realization slowly formed in his mind. Is swordsmanship not the only thing the Cardenas bloodline excels at? He thought. I rewrote everything as if the original magic itself was flawed from the beginning. Then, looking toward Esther, Leonard calmly said, "More than just okay. I was actually able to reinterpret one of the spells engraved inside the circle stone. It was Magic Missile." Esther's expression immediately changed after hearing that. Magic Missile is definitely just a beginner-level spell, but is something like that even possible? She asked in disbelief. At that moment, magical energy began swirling heavily around Leonard's body. Several glowing fragments of mana floated around him while the pressure in the room slowly increased once again. Leonard calmly observed the spell structure forming around his hand before speaking. "I judged the original spell to be inefficient and wasteful," he explained. "So I reinterpreted it into the shape of a sharp dagger instead." Esther stared at the floating daggers with complete shock written across her face. "Wait, are you telling me you changed the spell's base form itself?" Her voice trembled slightly as she continued, "Even I can't do something like that yet. And you created 5 of them at the same time." Leonard, however, remained strangely calm despite doing something that should have been impossible for a beginner. He simply turned toward Esther and asked, "Esther, if you don't mind, could you show me your magic circuit as well?" "I don't mind," Esther replied cautiously. "But why?" "Because," Leonard answered without hesitation, "I can see the parts that can be improved." The scene then shifted toward the Atlantis Magic Tower. Inside the massive tower filled with ancient magic circles and countless floating tomes, another magician could be seen waiting for them. The moment Leonard and Esther arrived, the man immediately spoke in an annoyed tone. "Please spare me from any troublesome matters. I'm already busy enough as the chief elder of the Magic Tower." The man standing before them was none other than the chief elder of the Atlantis Magic Tower itself, the legendary 7th-tier magician Jack Russell. Esther quickly responded after seeing him. "Of course I know that. There's no way your one and only disciple wouldn't understand how busy you are." "Master." Leonard also stepped forward respectfully and introduced himself. "Nice to meet you." "I am Leonard from Aquamarine." Jack Russell glanced toward him briefly before replying, "I am Jack Russell. Outsiders are rarely allowed into this place, but hurry up and explain the situation already." Esther immediately looked toward her master and said seriously, "Master, I have reached the 5th stage." The moment those words left her mouth, Jack Russell's expression changed completely. You had been stuck at the same point for the past several years, he said in disbelief. How did this happen? Esther immediately stepped forward and activated her magic while saying, Please see for yourself. A blazing fireball began forming above her hand, but unlike an ordinary spell, its shape continuously shifted and compressed under her control. As the flames spun violently, the fireball gradually transformed into a thin, rotating disc radiating terrifying heat and pressure. Like this, Esther explained proudly, I'm now able to change the form of my magic. By compressing and spinning it into a disc shape, I succeeded in maximizing its offensive power. Then she looked toward Leonard before adding honestly, Leonard fixed my circuit and gave me advice. The moment Leonard saw the unstable mana fluctuations surrounding the spell, his expression changed slightly. Esther, you really shouldn't use that in here, he warned her. Only then did Esther realize the danger herself. I'm sorry, I still can't control it properly, she shouted in panic. The spinning fire spell instantly lost stability and shot forward, uncontrollably through the room. The violent magic tore through the air, with overwhelming force as if it would destroy everything in its path. Jack Russell watched the entire scene calmly without even moving from his spot. To think this boy reached the stage of transformation, which is normally only attained by 6th-tier magicians, he muttered with genuine interest in his eyes. Interesting. The next moment, Jack casually waved his hand. With a single motion, the out-of-control spell was instantly erased as though it had never existed in the first place. The overwhelming fire vanished without leaving behind even a trace of heat. Then Jack slowly continued speaking while staring directly at Leonard. Overcoming the boundaries of magic regardless of natural talent or willpower is something that can never be achieved, unless the person realizes the truth themselves. His expression became much more serious afterward. I have incurred a debt that I would not be able to repay even in a lifetime. Esther must have brought you here because she understood that as well. Hearing that, Esther immediately turned her face away awkwardly, clearly embarrassed by the praise. Meanwhile, Jack had already stepped closer to Leonard. Looking directly into his eyes, the chief elder asked, Would you like to become my disciple? The room instantly became silent. I don't think there could possibly be a better opportunity for a magician than this, Jack added calmly. However, Leonard answered almost immediately without hesitation. I apologize, but I have already decided to walk the path of the sword. Jack stared at him for a moment before letting out a small sigh. An immediate reply, huh? What a pity. Still, his expression did not show disappointment for long. Instead, he nodded slightly and continued. In that case, as a token of my gratitude, I will grant you the same authority as Esther. Leonard's eyes narrowed slightly as Jack continued speaking. I will give you unrestricted access to the magic tower, along with unlimited use of all the knowledge and magical tools stored here. Even after offering all of that, however, it still would not equal the value of my personal guidance. And then Jack added one final thing while looking at him carefully. Furthermore, regarding the Aquamarine adventure crew to which you belong, I promise a good relationship with them as well. Thank you, Leonard replied respectfully. I will make frequent use of it. Even while answering, Leonard was already thinking calmly to himself. A good relationship with the magic tower will be extremely beneficial for Aquamarine too. After finishing their discussion, Leonard eventually left the magic tower and later returned to Zephyrus, Hall inside Bermuda. Frances was already sitting there waiting when he arrived. The moment she heard where he had been, her eyes widened in complete shock. You met with the chief elder of the magic tower? She asked immediately. Leonard nodded calmly. Yes, he promised to maintain a good relationship with Aquamarine. The instant Frances heard that, she hurried closer to him with excitement, written all over her face. Leonard, she exclaimed happily. I can't believe you brought such incredible fortune to us. The magic tower is a massive organization, Frances said excitedly, barely able to contain herself. It stands on the same level as Bermuda and even the Union Council itself. To think we could actually form ties with a place like that. I still can't believe it. Leonard quietly listened to her excitement before shifting his attention toward the papers in her hands. Fran, more importantly. What's this list of names? He asked. Frances immediately regained her focus and explained. These are the people I want to recruit into our adventure crew. If we don't increase our number of members, our range of activities will never expand properly. Honestly, without Aquamarine's current reputation, I think even reaching B rank would have been impossible for us. The stronger the new members are, the better, right? Leonard asked. Yes, of course, Frances answered instantly. Then, after glancing toward a noisy commotion nearby, she pointed in that direction. Actually, there's someone over there who looks like she could be useful. Leonard turned his head toward the scene and saw a man hanging helplessly upside down from a structure high above the ground. Several arrows had pinned his clothes perfectly in place, without seriously injuring him, leaving him dangling there in humiliation. The man shouted furiously, How dare you do this to me? Put me down this instant, you half-breed elf wench. Don't think you'll get away with this one-eyed Ninian. Before he could continue yelling, another arrow suddenly flew forward and struck near him with perfect precision. tightening the trap even more. The girl responsible calmly stepped closer while glaring at him coldly. "You're lucky we met here, you piece of trash." At that moment, several other adventurers arrived nearby and tried to calm the situation. Hey, isn't this going a little too far, Ninian?" one of them asked nervously. Another man crossed his arms and added, "If the guild finds you for this, are you even going to be able to pay it with your earnings?" Then someone else stepped forward with a more serious expression. "Stop being so stubborn and just join Santa Maria already. Your sister's ransom isn't exactly cheap either, right?" The atmosphere instantly became much heavier after those words. Leonard quietly walked into the middle of the scene and said calmly, "You people are the ones going too far." Everyone's attention immediately shifted toward him. Leonard then took the bow from Clara, Francis's female bodyguard, and slowly pulled back the string. The moment he did, an overwhelming burst of wind pressure exploded outward from the bow itself. The sheer force alone shocked everyone standing nearby, and the air trembled violently as if the weapon had awakened. Even Ninian's eyes widened in surprise. Who exactly are you?" she asked. Without lowering the bow, Leonard answered calmly, "I'm Leonard of the Aquamarine Adventure Crew." Clara, standing nearby, quietly said, "Thank you for borrowing my bow, Leonard." Meanwhile, Francis stared at him in complete disbelief. "Leonard can use a bow too?" she muttered. Then she immediately turned toward the girl and smiled warmly. "Ninian, was it? Would you like to join us?" Francis continued confidently. "From the looks of it, I don't think it would be a bad deal for you either. I promise you won't regret it." Ninian remained silent for a moment, clearly troubled by what she had just witnessed. In her mind, she kept replaying Leonard's earlier movement with a bow. That attack just now? She thought. It's on a completely different level from my archery, which only imitates spirit arts. If I could actually learn something like that. However, before she could answer, another man nearby suddenly interrupted with a mocking laugh. "What do you mean she won't regret it?" he sneered. "I heard Aquamarine is already on the verge of collapse." He looked directly at Ninian and continued in a cold tone. "You better think carefully. Nobody's going to save you when you nearly die aboard a sinking ship." The man continued speaking arrogantly, clearly trying to pressure Ninian into making her decision. "Unlike a certain hopeless crew, the commander of Santa Maria is—" Before he could finish dramatically praising his leader, a massive and heavily built man suddenly stepped forward from the crowd. His mere presence instantly silenced the surrounding adventurers. "Stop spouting nonsense," the large man said calmly. The moment the others saw him, the arrogant adventurer immediately straightened himself and nervously said, "Be boss." The towering man glanced around the area, with complete confidence before speaking again. "There's no need for explanations. Everyone here already recognizes our presence." The man standing before them was none other than Christopher Conrad, the commander of the Santa Maria Adventure Crew. Christopher folded his arms and looked down at the others with a faint smirk. "Well, I suppose B-rank adventurers probably wouldn't understand anyway." The atmosphere immediately became tense after those words. Even without openly showing hostility, the overwhelming pressure radiating from Christopher alone was enough to make everyone cautious around him. Leonard silently observed the man from a distance while carefully analyzing him. "This guy," Leonard thought to himself. "He looks simple-minded at first glance, but he's an absolute powerhouse. He's only one step away from reaching the transcendent stage." Leonard's eyes narrowed slightly as he continued studying Christopher's massive frame and terrifying aura. "If I fight him head-on right now, I'll be at an overwhelming disadvantage," he admitted internally. However, a skilled archer like Ninian would become an essential asset during naval battles. She's exactly the kind of talent Aquamarine desperately needs. His expression gradually became more determined. "She's a talent I absolutely cannot allow to slip away." Even while standing before an opponent far stronger than himself, Leonard's resolve did not waver in the slightest. "Even if this situation turns into a fight, I will definitely make her our comrade." We flash back, delving into Ninian's painful past. A younger, more innocent Ninian is seen with her cheerful half-sister Vivian, who she clearly adored. Ninian recalls how despite being a half-elf, she found family in her sister. Vivian was a pure-blooded elf and a talented spirit user. But more importantly, she was Ninian's only friend. But their happiness was shattered in an instant when slave traders brutally captured Vivian right before Ninian's eyes. The traumatic memory of her sister is seared into her mind. The leader of the thugs, a vile man, had captured Vivian to exploit her rare spirit arts, signing her life away on a contract. Surrounded and helpless, a younger Ninian had pleaded for her sister's life, offering to do anything. But the man just laughed, mocking her inferior spirit arts and casting her aside for being an impure half-breed. The memory of her powerlessness and despair still haunts her to this day. Back in the present, Ninian is filled with a grim determination. She knows she's the only one who can save her sister now, but she's not alone. Leonard steps forward, his decision made. He boldly challenges Christopher Conrad, the captain of the Santa Maria, to a duel for Vivian's contract, stunning everyone in the hall. Marion panics, trying to pull Leonard back from his reckless challenge. She desperately pleads with Fran to stop him, warning that this means starting an all-out war with the A-rank Santa Maria band. Fran, however, looks to Leonard for an explanation. Leonard calmly tells her that this is their one chance to recruit not just a skilled archer, but a rare spirit user as well. He asks for her trust. After a tense moment, Fran's eyes harden with resolve. She gives Leonard her silent approval. Seeing Ninian hesitate, Leonard grabs her wrist to steady her. He asks her if she's losing her nerve, encouraging her to stand firm. His bold move infuriates Christopher, who grabs Leonard by the collar, roaring with rage. The hulking captain belittles him, demanding to know what a snot-nosed punk could possibly wager for any asset as priceless as an elven spirit user. Nin watches on, her heart pounding with a mix of fear and a flicker of hope. Just as tensions are about to boil over, Fran steps in, raising the stakes sky high. She declares that Aquamarine will bet the purchase rights to their entire ship. To sweeten the pot, she's throwing Santa Maria's A-rank exploration rights. Also, Christopher's eyes widen at the audacious offer. Leonard watches his captain with a confident smirk. Intrigued, Christopher agrees, but adds a crucial condition to prevent them from hiring outside help. The duel must be fought by a current member of Aquamarine, sneering that he won't let some noble lady hire a swordmaster to do her dirty work. And to make it personal, he declares the duel will be a one-on-one match, him versus Leonard. No objections accepted. With the terms set, Christopher and his crew depart, leaving a palpable tension in the air. Later, back at the Atlantis Magic Tower, the gravity of the situation sinks in. Marion slams her fist on the table in frustration, calling Leonard insane for challenging an A-rank captain. She reminds everyone that Conrad isn't just a brute. He's a powerful and experienced magic swordsman. Fran, however, sips her tea with surprising nonchalance, simply stating that Conrad is a gross guy who pisses her off. The crew gathers around the table, the mood heavy. Marion argues that even with her and Ninian's help, they stand no chance against a magic swordsman of Conrad's caliber. Ninian, feeling responsible for the conflict, apologizes for dragging them into her mess. But Leonard tells her not to worry. As he speaks, a brilliant blue aura begins to emanate from his sword. He stands up, his entire body enveloped in a powerful blue light, stunning his crewmates. Fran gasps in shock, recognizing the technique as a blade. She can't believe it. According to his file, Leonard should only be at stage 3 of the external force realm, a level far below what's needed for this skill. With a cool confidence, Leonard smirks and clarifies that his official rank is just what's on paper. He reveals that he's never had a reason to go all out before now, and with his true strength, he is certain he won't lose to Conrad. Fran is momentarily speechless, her mind racing to comprehend this massive revelation about their newest member. Then her doubt melts away, replaced by a brilliant, trusting smile. She tells Leonard she knew she was right to trust him all along. He simply thanks her for her faith. Though impressed, Ninian raises a valid point. Conrad may not be a true swordmaster yet, but he is a magic swordsman. They'll need a plan for his magic. Just as they begin to strategize, unexpected visitors arrive. It's none other than Esther and the chief elder of the Magic Tower, Jack Russell. Jack announces that he understands the situation completely. It turns out Leonard, anticipating foul play, had gone to the Magic Tower and requested the chief elder himself to act as an official witness for the duel. Leonard and Fran stand respectfully before one of the most powerful men in Atlantis. Jack agrees without hesitation, citing that Leonard is Esther's benefactor and therefore an ally of the tower. With a shrewd glint in his eye, Jack adds that he also suspects a man like Conrad wouldn't be above using cheap tricks to win. The scene then shifts to a darkened room where a new powerful figure is introduced. This is Pablo L. Orlando Peterson, a member of the Atlantis Union Council and captain of the A-rank band, Moby Dick. Christopher Conrad is kneeling before him like a loyal subordinate. Pablo smirks, revealing that he's heard about the duel. He sees this as the perfect opportunity to seize the highly sought-after Aquamarine. To ensure their victory, Pablo presents Conrad with a dark, pulsating elixir. This secret drug will temporarily grant Conrad power surpassing that of a swordmaster. Conrad scoffs, believing he can crush Leonard without it. But a single threatening glare from Pablo silences his protests. Pablo sternly warns him not to underestimate his opponent, suspecting Aquamarine has an ace up their sleeve. He orders Conrad to drink the elixir and secure the Aquamarine at all costs. Forced into a corner, Conrad clenches his fist and accepts the order, his face a mask of grim determination. Back at the office, Leonard's eyes burn with an unshakable resolve, ready to face whatever tricks his opponent throws at him. The day of the duel arrives in the magnificent port city of Atlantis. The stage is set at the Bermuda Grand Auditorium, a massive arena where warriors settle their scores. In the stands, the crowd buzzes with excitement, placing their bets on the high-stakes match. The overwhelming consensus is clear. The A-rank captain Conrad is the sure winner. Aquamarine's crew watches on with bated breath, Nin fighting to keep her composure for the man fighting for her sister's freedom. In the center of the arena, the hulking captain, Conrad looks down on his opponent with utter contempt. Across from him, Leonard stands calm and collected, his red eyes burning with quiet intensity. The announcer hypes up the one-on-one match. A battle of David versus Goliath with the fate of two bands on the line. But this isn't just any back alley brawl. The announcer introduces the official witness, the chief elder of the Magic Tower himself, Jack Russell. Jack's presence is a calculated move, one that Fran had a hand in orchestrating. We flash back to Fran making a shocking proposal to Esther. She wants to bet all of Aquamarine's funds on the duel. Fran grabs her hands, pleading earnestly. This isn't just a gamble. It's a golden opportunity to skyrocket their capital. Her logic is simple. With everyone betting on Conrad, the odds for Leonard are astronomical. It's the perfect long shot. This was all part of a larger plan discussed beforehand. With almost no public info on Leonard, the bookies have written him off, creating the perfect trap for the greedy. Leonard adds his own reassurance, wielding a magnificent sword borrowed from the tower's armory. He tells Esther that with this blade he won't lose. Seeing his unwavering confidence, Esther's doubt begins to fade. She asks if he's truly certain. Leonard gives her a disarming smile and confirms her trust is well placed, telling her to go align. Back in the present, the announcer screams for the duel to begin, and Conrad wastes no time with pleasantries. He gets right in Leonard's face, reminding him with a sneer that killing is perfectly legal within these walls. Leonard simply fires back, asking if the big man is scared that his mouth is running wild. Infuriated by the brat's nerve, Conrad's calm facade shatters. He unleashes his power as a fifth-tier mage, conjuring searing fireballs and promising to wipe the smug look off Leonard's face. The fiery projectiles rocket towards their target, but Leonard moves like a blur, easily dodging the magical onslaught. He assesses the attack, realizing he needs to bring out his own trump card right away. The sword from the tower hums to life, glowing with a vibrant turquoise aura. This is no ordinary weapon. It's a top-class artifact capable of channeling magic. Leonard embusts the blade with wind magic, preparing to give Conrad a taste of his own medicine. He effortlessly slices through the fireballs, sending the magical energy spiraling out of control. Conrad's eyes widen in disbelief. This rookie isn't just a swordsman. He's a magic swordsman, too. Before Conrad can recover, Leonard is on him, his blade a dizzying blur of motion. He closes the distance in an instant, his speed far surpassing anything Conrad expected. Conrad is immediately put on the back foot. He stomps on the floor hard, making a shield out of the torn ground. The sheer force destroys the Leonard's momentum. Conrad has secretly placed a gravity-manipulating spell on the ground, using the flying debris as a disguise to pin Leonard down. With his opponent slowed, he calls down a bolt of lightning. Confident that speed is useless against gravity, Leonard is engulfed in the electric attack, seemingly trapped within the powerful spell. The arena floor explodes in a brilliant flash of light and a cloud of dust. But when the dust settles, Conrad is the one who's been struck, a fresh cut on his cheek. Leonard tanked the hit and has already counterattacked. He follows up with a brutal kick to the captain's jaw and another vicious stomp that sends the huge man crashing into the dirt. Conrad coughs up blood, completely overwhelmed by the ferocity of the counter. Now with his shirt half torn, which by the way is looking really cool, Leonard coldly informs Conrad that a magic swordsman who can't even draw his main sword is just full of himself. Conrad pushes himself up, admitting he underestimated his foe. He decides it's time to use the secret weapon his boss gave him. He puts the dark elixir into his mouth and swallows it without hesitation. The pill immediately takes effect, and Conrad lets out an agonizing roar as his body begins to transform. A terrifying dark purple aura erupts from him, twisting his features into a monstrous grimace. Fueled by the drug, his eyes glow a demonic red as he vows to murder the boy in front of him. Leonard calmly assesses the new threat, recognizing the power surging from Conrad. It is now on par with a swordmaster. The transformed captain leaps high into the air with his massive great sword. Leonard just smirks. So the old dog did have a new trick after all. As Conrad brings the blade crashing down, Leonard meets it head-on. Leonard's blade slices off Conrad's leg, drawing blood. The drug-fueled monster roars in fury, his eyes burning with red-hot rage. He swings wildly, but his movements are now just brute force without finesse. Leonard easily vaults over the attack just by leaping into the air. Conrad looks at his opponent, who's still in the air with cold eyes, and declares that playtime is over. Finally getting serious, Conrad draws on his own training, unleashing a malevolent purple aura blade around his great sword. Leonard's expression doesn't change. Seeing his opponent is finally ready to use his sword properly, he decides to answer in kind. In a flash, a massive pure blue aura blade ignites around Leonard's entire body. The two opposing forces, one dark and corrupted, the other pure and controlled, rush towards one another. They collide in the center of the arena in a spectacular explosion of power. But it's no contest. Leonard's azure aura instantly shatters Conrad's corrupted power. The captain is blown back, utterly defenseless as Leonard presses his attack. Conrad stares in pure terror. He can't comprehend how this brat can use Aura Blade too. But what Leonard unleashes next is beyond anything Conrad could have imagined. His aura takes the form of a colossal ethereal dragon, its power shaking the very foundations of the auditorium. Up in the stands, the hall's administrator, Carmen, leaps to his feet, screaming that the match is rigged. He tries to declare the duel invalid, yelling that there's no way a true magic swordsman could lose to a kid. This is Carmen, the administrator of the A-rank hall, and he's just lost a fortune betting on a sure thing. He grits his teeth, realizing this loss will ruin him, all because of the elixir that was supposed to guarantee victory. But a calm voice cuts through his pathetic whining. It's Jack Russell. The chief elder coldly asks if Carmen intends to nullify an official duel that he personally witnessed and notarized. The announcer freezes and Carmen's blood runs cold. Disrespecting the chief elder is a death sentence in Atlantis. He immediately backpedals, stammering apologies for his outburst. A glint flashes across Jack's glasses. Everything, including this desperate attempt to void the results, had been predicted by Leonard. His duty as a witness complete, Jack turns to leave. But he leaves Leonard with a parting question. How does he plan to settle things with that man? All eyes turn back to the arena where Leonard stands over the broken form of Captain Conrad. After the intense duel, we transition to the Aquamarine's ship, sailing under a bright sun. Back in the captain's quarters, good news arrives. Their proposal has been approved. Fran announces to the crew that they're now officially allowed to explore. Rank Cs, although there are still a few conditions to meet. But more importantly, thanks to their massive winnings from the duel, their financial troubles are over for the foreseeable future. With a look of sincere gratitude, Fran thanks Leonard for making it all possible. Leonard simply replies that he was honored to help. Just then, two figures approach him. It's Ninian and her newly freed sister, Vivian, who thank Leonard profusely for saving them. Vivian introduces herself as a wind spirit user, clearly smitten with their savior. Leonard, ever the stoic, coolly states that their interests just happen to align, and as long as they do their part for the crew, that's enough. The sisters, a little flustered by his bluntness, still try to offer him something more as thanks. But Fran smoothly steps in, welcoming them as comrades and reminding them that friends don't need to keep score. She then tasks Marion with showing the two new elf recruits to their quarters. Later that night, Fran finds Leonard alone on the deck under the starry sky. She wonders aloud if his intimidating presence is what sent everyone to bed so early. The quiet moment prompts her to finally share her true reason for wanting to become an A-rank adventure band. Leonard, sharp as ever, says he can more or less guess her motivations. Fran asks him to listen anyway, admitting it's hard to keep it all bottled up inside. Leonard agrees, ready to hear the story of the woman he's chosen to follow. And so we flash back 8 years into the past. The scene is the Union Council, the governing body of Atlantis. A tense meeting is underway, discussing a dangerous, swirling red rift in the Fifth Sea. A young captain argues against leaving it unchecked. This is Neward, the former captain of the Aquamarine and Fran's father. But a high-ranking council member named Pablo casually dismisses his concerns. Pablo arrogantly claims the rift is stable and won't be a problem for decades. Nord retorts that their projections mean nothing if something unexpected happened. Pablo reveals his true colors, arguing that the rift is a source of valuable byproducts from the other side. Nard's face contorts with rage at this blatant greed. He lunges forward, grabbing Pablo by the collar, furious that he would risk lives for profit. Pablo remains unfazed, coldly reminding Nord that the entire city of Atlantis was built on the wealth from those very byproducts. His eyes gleam with malice, showing just how deep his corruption runs. Seeing the rest of the council remain silent, Nicord realizes they've all been bought. With a flick of his wrist, Nord dismisses Pablo, the decision already made. Defeated, Nord returns to his ship and slams his fist down in fury. He declares that they can no longer count on the other A-rank bands for help. With his eyes burning with resolve, he makes a fateful decision. Aquamarine will close every last rift themselves. Dressed in his brilliant white captain's coat, Neor readies his crew for the impossible mission. The Aquamarine ship powers up, engulfed in a protective blue aura as it sets sail for the dangerous rifts. Its magical core hums with immense energy. The vessel cuts through the waves at incredible speed. They unleash their power, ready to take on the world's greatest threats alone. Fran narrates that in its prime, Aquamarine was a force to be reckoned with, boasting a 7th-tier mage and 3 near-transcendent fighters. Led by the spirit knight Neor, they accomplished the impossible, sealing 4 rifts in less than a month. But their heroic deeds were not celebrated. Neor receives a call from the council. He's told to stand down that his actions are making the other adventurers look bad and hurting their business. Neord ignores them, stating they'll return only after sealing the last most dangerous rift, Charybdis. The council member is horrified, calling it a suicide mission. But Neord is determined. The greater the danger, the more reason he has to seal it. Without hesitation, the Aquamarine plunges into the swirling vortex of otherworldly energy. The mighty ship is swallowed whole by the massive chaotic rift. Back in the present, Leonard asks what happened next. Fran looks away, her voice filled with a deep sadness as she remembers just how strong they once were. The memory brings a flicker of pain to her eyes. Leonard listens silently, understanding the weight of her past. The flashback resumes. The Aquamarine emerges victorious, sailing into a triumphant sunset. The crew celebrates their return home. Nerd looks to the horizon, satisfied that he has bought the world some time from the encroaching darkness. He smiles, knowing his daughter is waiting for him, even if she is mad at him for being away so long. Just then, a young Fran and her guardian Marion arrives on the deck of ship. Nerd calls out to his daughter. A happy young Fran asks if her daddy is finally coming home, but their reunion is shattered by a massive fiery explosion. Their home base is under attack. It's an ambush by the Moby. Dick. Nord's face twists in horror and betrayal as he realizes Pablo was behind it all. Marion desperately shields a terrified Fran from the chaos. Nord screams at Marion to protect his daughter at all costs. He barks orders to his crew, trying to make a break for the safety of the main docks. With gritted teeth, he commands his remaining fighters to hold off the enemy ship. Pablo mocks Nord's worthless pride and ordering his men to crush Aquamarine spirit completely. Enraged, Nord unleashes his own power, roaring for Pablo to shut his mouth. His eyes blaze with an unshakable will. He vows that even if he dies, the honor and spirit of Aquamarine will live on through his daughter. And with that, his ship is engulfed in a final devastating explosion. The flashback ends, returning to the present, where Fran's eyes reflect that same fiery determination. She explains that this is why she can never give up on her father's dream. She offers Leonard a way out, admitting that her path means making an enemy of Atlantis itself. But Leonard immediately shuts her down. He's not going anywhere. He smiles, telling her that the chance to fight strong, deserving foes is exactly what he lives for. A wicked glint in his eye, he adds that if they're scum who deserve no mercy, it's even better. Fran is completely taken back by his unwavering loyalty and battle lust. Her shock gives way to a burst of genuine relieved laughter. She tells him he's truly incredible and asks if he'll continue to follow her as a true member of Aquamarine. Leonard gives a slight confident smile. He tells Fran he's counting on. A few days later, back at the Bermuda branch, the members of Aquamarine were busier than ever. Now that they had a clear goal in front of them, there was no time to waste. Everyone focused on sharpening their skills and preparing for the challenges that awaited them. In the training grounds, Leonard stood in the center of a fierce sparring match. Despite facing two opponents at once, he remained completely composed. An arrow infused with wind magic shot toward him from Ninian, but Leonard effortlessly shifted his body and avoided it by the smallest margin. At the same time, Marion rushed in from another angle, her blade cutting through the air with incredible speed. Leonard smoothly parried her attack before immediately countering. His sword flashed forward with overwhelming force, forcing both of them to retreat. After a few more exchanges, Leonard raised his hand and called for the match to end. Marion and Ninian stopped where they stood, both breathing heavily. Sweat ran down their faces as they struggled to catch their breath. The training had pushed them to their limits, but the results were impossible to deny. Leonard nodded with satisfaction as he looked at the two of them. He praised their improvement, especially the way they had learned to coordinate their attacks. He explained that teamwork would be crucial during the dangerous journeys that lay ahead. Hearing those words filled both Marion and Ninian with confidence. Under Leonard's guidance, they could clearly feel themselves growing stronger with every passing day. Bringing the training session to a close, Leonard informed them that their guests had arrived and were waiting. Standing nearby was a man dressed in a sharp and formal suit. In one hand, he carried an official document while quietly observing everything that had taken place. As Leonard and the others approached, the man introduced himself as Benjamin, the head of Bermuda's A-Rank Hall. He admitted that he had been watching the sparring match from the sidelines and said that the rumors he had heard were apparently true. Leonard had really defeated Captain Conrad. Even more impressive was the fact that he had just overwhelmed Marion and Ninian, the strongest B-rank duo in Bermuda, entirely on his own. Benjamin stated that after witnessing their abilities firsthand, there was no doubt in his mind that Leonard's combat power had already reached the level of an A-rank adventurer. However, Benjamin's expression soon turned serious. Fran immediately sensed that there was a problem. While Aquamarine had more than enough strength to qualify for promotion, there was one major issue preventing them from advancing. The crew was severely understaffed. Benjamin explained that an A-rank band required a certain number of active members, and Aquamarine simply didn't meet that requirement yet. Fran quickly asked how many people they still needed. Benjamin calmly raised 2 fingers. The answer was simple. If they managed to recruit just 2 more members, their promotion to A-rank would be approved immediately, with a new objective set before them. Fran and Leonard headed into the city in search of potential recruits. Their destination wasn't the clean and respectable districts where adventurers usually gathered. Instead, they found themselves walking through one of the roughest parts of town. The streets were crowded, noisy, and filled with suspicious figures lurking around every corner. Looking around, Leonard couldn't help but question whether they could really find reliable teammates in a place like this. Fran, however, remained confident. She believed that hidden among these streets were people whose talents could become invaluable to Aquamarine if they could only convince them to join. Before they could continue any farther, a harsh voice suddenly called out from ahead. A group of rough-looking thugs stepped into their path and blocked the street. Their leader stared at them with a sneer and asked if they even knew where they were standing. This area belonged to Big Bro Gano, and outsiders weren't welcome here. His eyes narrowed with hostility as he warned them to leave before they got hurt. The thug reached for his sword, but before the weapon could even leave its sheath, Leonard moved. His hand shot forward with lightning speed and stopped the man's motion instantly. Leonard calmly informed him that they hadn't come looking for trouble. Unfortunately, once a sword had been drawn, things were different. Without another word, Leonard drove a devastating palm strike into the thug's chest. The man was launched through the air like a ragdoll before crashing into a nearby wall and collapsing unconscious. The remaining thugs froze in shock, unable to believe what they had just witnessed. Then their attention shifted toward a figure emerging from the shadows. The atmosphere changed instantly. The newcomer walked forward with calm confidence, and even the thugs seemed relieved by his appearance. Sensing a stronger opponent, Leonard wasted no time. He lunged forward and unleashed a powerful kick. The man met the attack without hesitation. With a scoff, he commented that the kick was both fast and heavy. Wrapping a thick chain around his arm, he released a blue aura that crackled with energy. To ordinary people on the streets, such power might seem overwhelming. But to a veteran mercenary who had gambled with death countless times, it was merely child's play. In the next instant, the man swung his enormous scythe. The massive weapon cut through the air with terrifying speed. Leonard was forced to drop to one knee to avoid the deadly arc as it swept over his head. Looking up from his crouched position, a grin appeared on Leonard's face. He casually replied that he had been thinking exactly the same thing. Nearby, Fran's eyes widened in surprise. Gano! The name escaped her lips almost unconsciously. The man paused as he finally noticed her. His expression shifted slightly before he asked in disbelief if she was really little. Frances from back then. Hearing that, Leonard immediately understood. This was the person they had been searching for all along. Gano the Whaler. Fran quickly confirmed it. This was the man they had come to find. Gano seemed genuinely confused, as he asked why they were suddenly looking for him after all this time. Taking a deep breath, Fran stepped forward. Determination filled her voice as she explained that she was restarting Aquamarine's activities. More than anything, she needed his help. Calling him by his full title, she reminded him that he was one of Aquamarine's legendary heroes and the younger brother of the great Stormtooth Dentuso. Hope shone in her eyes as she asked him to lend them his strength and fight alongside them once again. For a brief moment, silence filled the street. Then Gano's expression hardened. He bluntly told her to go home. He reminded Fran that Aquamarine's problems ran far deeper than she seemed willing to admit. They hadn't simply made an enemy of Moby Dick, they had made an enemy of Atlantis itself. Looking directly at her, he asked whether she truly expected him to succeed where even his legendary brother had failed. Letting out a heavy sigh, Gano turned around and began walking away. He apologized, but he had no intention of joining them. He had no interest in following a road that led nowhere. As his men followed behind him, he advised Fran to stop being stubborn and find another path for herself. Fran stood frozen in place. The rejection hit harder than she had expected. Even though she knew convincing Gano would be difficult, hearing his answer still felt like watching her final hope slip away. Her shoulders slowly lowered as disappointment filled her heart. Then Leonard suddenly spoke. He told her to wait there for a moment. Before Fran could even ask what he was planning, Leonard exploded forward. His body shot across the street, toward the departing Gano. Hearing the sudden movement, Gano spun around with anger flashing across his face. He demanded to know what the hell Leonard thought he was doing. Leonard stopped in front of him and squared his shoulders. A fierce grin spread across his face. If words won't work, he said, then I'll convince you with my fists. The moment he finished speaking, Leonard charged. His punch crashed into Gano with a bone-shaking impact that echoed throughout the street. The force sent the former hero flying backward, and cracks spread across the cobblestone road beneath them. As dust filled the air, Leonard calmly walked toward a spear resting nearby and picked it up. Looking directly at Gano, he began to taunt him. Wasn't he tired of roads whose destination he couldn't see? Because from where Leonard stood, it looked like Gano couldn't even see his own path anymore. Gano struggled back to his knees, muttering curses under his breath as he glared at the young adventurer. He demanded to know what game Leonard was trying to play. Leonard simply lowered the spear toward him. He declared that he would show Gano the path he was meant to walk. Admittedly, his skill with a spear wasn't on the same level as his swordsmanship, but it would be more than enough for what he intended to do. For the first time, a spark ignited within Gano's eyes. He could tell this wasn't empty confidence. This kid's strength was real. Slowly, Gano rose to his feet and tightened his grip on his weapon. The fire of a veteran warrior returned to his gaze as he faced Leonard head-on. "Don't get cocky," he growled. "Just because you're holding a spear doesn't mean you'll win a spear duel." And with those words, the tension between the two fighters reached its peak as the battle was about to begin. The fight between Leonard and Galano was becoming more and more intense with every passing moment. Galano was clearly struggling to keep up as the battle continued. His movements were no longer as confident as before, and deep inside he could not help but feel confused. Looking at Leonard with growing disbelief, he thought to himself, "This guy, is he reading my attacks?" Before he could fully process what was happening, Leonard suddenly launched a powerful kick straight into Galano's abdomen. The impact was tremendous, forcing Galano back. Leonard maintained a calm smile as he looked at him and said, "It's excellent spearmanship. That is, if you hadn't neglected your training." The moment those words left his mouth, Leonard pressed forward without giving Galano even the slightest opportunity to recover. His attacks came one after another in an endless stream, leaving no room for counterattacks and no chance for Galano to regain his footing. Every move Leonard made was precise and overwhelming, completely controlling the flow of the battle. However, Galano was not someone who would accept defeat so easily. Gritting his teeth, he shouted at the top of his lungs, "My brother, my master. The person who showed me the path I should take has passed away." Yet in the very next moment, his voice faltered. His eyes widened in shock as he stared ahead. Standing before him, Leonard was preparing an incredibly powerful attack. At the same time, he spoke in a firm and instructive tone, as if he were teaching a student rather than fighting an opponent. "Your step-in is too weak. Thrust deeper. Keep the hand gripping the spear half open. Put all your strength into it. Only at the exact moment you unleash the power of your rotation." As Leonard finished speaking, the attack was unleashed. A terrifying thrust exploded forward with unbelievable force. The sheer power behind it was enough to tear through the surroundings, creating an enormous cut that stretched across the battlefield. The scene was so overwhelming that Galano could only stare in stunned silence. He slowly dropped to his knees, completely shocked by what he had just witnessed. For a moment, everything became quiet. Then, with an unusually calm expression, he softly said, "So that's how it is." He raised his spear in front of him and looked at it carefully before continuing. "I feel like the time that had stopped for me has started flowing again. I sincerely thank you for sparring with me. Could you teach me just a little more?" There was no anger left in his voice, no frustration, and no resentment. Instead, there was only gratitude and a renewed sense of purpose. It was as if the battle had awakened something within him that had long been dormant. Hearing those words, Leonard looked at him and simply smiled. "Of course!" After hearing Galano's sincere request, Leonard looked at him without hesitation and replied, "Come at me. I'll take you on until you're satisfied." There was no mockery or arrogance in his voice. Instead, it carried the confidence of a true warrior and the patience of a seasoned master. Galano could feel the sincerity behind those words, and for the first time in a long while, a genuine spark of motivation reignited within him. Afterward, the two of them headed off together to continue their sparring elsewhere. Time passed, and when they eventually returned, Francis immediately noticed something different about Galano. The exhaustion and frustration that had weighed heavily on him before were gone. In their place was a renewed spirit and a refreshed expression. Looking at him curiously, Francis smiled and said, "Mr. Galano, you look somehow refreshed, don't you?" Galano let out a small laugh before answering honestly, "That's because I met a good master. It's been a while since I was beaten down like that, so I'm fired up." There was not a trace of bitterness in his words. On the contrary, he sounded energized and more determined than ever. Being defeated had not crushed his spirit. Instead, it had allowed him to rediscover the passion and drive he had been missing for so long. Hearing that, Leonard glanced toward him and calmly said, "Galano will become an excellent combatant. Perhaps he might even surpass his older brother." The praise was so direct and sincere that even Francis seemed surprised. Looking back and forth between the two men, she could not help but comment, "Do men normally become friends by beating each other up? That's rare praise coming from Leonard." Leonard thought about her words for a moment before giving a faint smile. "Is that so? I guess it means I was able to enjoy myself for the first time in a while as well." His response caused Francis to smile warmly. Seeing how much Galano had changed after the sparring session, she decided that this was the perfect opportunity. Taking a step forward, she spoke in a serious yet welcoming tone. "Well then, I'll ask you once more. Just as my father once recruited Mr. Dentison, I would like to welcome you, Mr. Galano, as a crew member. Will you become a member of Aquamarine?" As she said those words, Francis extended her hand toward him. For a brief moment, Galano looked at the hand stretched out before him. He thought about everything that had happened, the people he had met, and the path that now lay ahead of him. Then a smile slowly appeared on his face. Reaching forward, he firmly shook her hand and said, I guess I really can't refuse anymore. B-rank adventurer, Wailing Galano. That I will remain unwavering against any wave, and undaunted before any storm. I swear in the name of the sea. His declaration carried the dignity and pride of a true adventurer. It was not merely an acceptance of an invitation. It was a vow, a promise that no matter what dangers awaited them in the future, he would stand firm and face them without fear. As Leonard watched the scene unfold before him, he quietly reflected to himself. All right, we're one step closer to our A-rank promotion, after successfully recruiting Galano. Francis felt that the crew was finally moving in the right direction. However, there was still one thing on her mind, thinking about the future of Aquamarine and the challenges that awaited them during rift exploration. She spoke thoughtfully. Just one more person. I'd like to recruit a magician if possible. With that goal still lingering in her thoughts, she, Leonard, and Galano began making their way back. Meanwhile, elsewhere, two familiar figures were approaching Aquamarine. As they looked at the ship, Jack spoke while observing it carefully. This is what the Aquamarine looks like. Esther, who had accompanied him, looked around as well before saying, It's luxurious, isn't it? To think that Master would actually come visit. Not long afterward, they arrived and were spotted by Francis. The moment she recognized them, a look of pleasant surprise appeared on her face. Elder Jack Russell? Miss Esther? What brings you here so suddenly? Jack gave a polite nod before answering. I'm sorry for barging in so unexpectedly. I heard that your goal of promoting to A-rank is for rift exploration. By coincidence, my main research theme is rifts. In order to continue my research as a scholar, I require various specimens, and all of those are provided by the adventure crews in Bermuda. However, recently that supply has stopped. As Leonard listened quietly from the side, a thought immediately crossed his mind. The Union Council? Is this Pablo's doing? The more he considered it, the more convinced he became. In order to manipulate market prices, he must be intentionally restricting the circulation of byproducts from rift explorations. The situation suddenly made much more sense. If the supply of rift materials had been deliberately reduced, it would naturally increase their value and allow certain people to control the market for their own benefit. Francis listened carefully before asking, So the reason you came here today is… Before she could finish, Jack snapped his fingers and confidently declared, I want to continue my research while helping with your explorations here. With me around, there will likely be more things you can acquire aside from just byproducts. His proposal immediately caught everyone's attention. A scholar whose specialty was rift research could provide knowledge and opportunities that ordinary adventurers would never have access to. After hearing his explanation, Francis smiled warmly. Of course you're welcome, but are you really sure about this? Before Jack could respond, Esther finally spoke up after remaining silent for quite some time. We can't treat him as a crew member, but he can board this ship as a researcher. Well, more like a guest, I suppose. Esther continued speaking on Jack's behalf, making sure everyone understood exactly why she supported his decision to accompany them. But his combat abilities are outstanding, and he's highly cooperative. In times of need, he'll be a powerful helper for the Aquamarine. How about it, Mr. Benjamin? Aren't these conditions sufficient? The man responsible for reviewing the report thought about it for a moment before nodding in agreement. Yes, in terms of combat power, there are no problems at all. And there probably won't be any enemies who would attack a ship with the Chief Elder on board. Very well. Here is the list of rifts currently available for exploration. As he handed over the information, Francis accepted it gratefully and said, Thank you very much. She quickly looked through the document before raising her head and asking, So we can immediately head to the rifts listed here, right? The man nodded without hesitation. Of course. Then, with a respectful expression, he added, Well then, I pray for your good fortune in battle, everyone of Aquamarine. With all the necessary preparations finally completed, Aquamarine wasted no time. Soon afterward, the ship could be seen sailing across the vast ocean, cutting through the waves as it headed toward its next destination. The sea breeze flowed across the deck while the crew prepared themselves for the challenges waiting ahead. As everyone gathered aboard, a man carrying a spear stepped forward and spoke with a faint smile. I haven't even been able to properly greet everyone yet. Your impatient personality hasn't changed since the old days. Hearing that, Francis could only laugh awkwardly and admit, I guess I really did rush things, didn't I? She then looked toward Galano and continued, You look refreshed and cool. It is an honor to meet you again, Mr. Galano. Everyone will be surprised. Galano appeared far more composed than before. The frustration and burdens that had weighed him down seemed to have disappeared. replaced by confidence and renewed determination. After hearing their conversation, one of the newer members finally spoke up. "So where are we heading now? It's about time you at least tell us the destination." At that moment, Leonard was shown standing calmly on the deck. His expression was serious as he looked toward the horizon. Without wasting any words, he answered, "Spatial scale C, difficulty B, danger level B+, the rift in the 5th sea area." The atmosphere aboard the ship immediately became more serious. This would not be an ordinary expedition. A rift with a B+ danger rating was filled with unknown risks, powerful monsters, and opportunities that could change the future of the crew. As Aquamarine continued sailing toward its objective, the scene shifted to the destination itself. There, countless monsters could be seen gathered throughout the area. After that, we are shown the title, Rift Sea Orc's Lair, difficulty B, as their ship begins entering the rift. Looking at the massive phenomenon before him, Leonard reacts with surprise and says that this is a rift and that it is much bigger than he had imagined. He adds that it seems a little different from the information Fran and Benjamin had given them, but it should not cause any major problems. At that moment, Frances begins explaining the purpose of the expedition. She says that the objective of this exploration is reconnaissance, and that she has arranged the formation with the intention of giving everyone real combat experience. According to her plan, Galano will take the vanguard position at the front while Ninian will cover the rear. Esther will provide support from all directions, and as for command, she is leaving everything entirely to Leonard this time. Frances explains that Leonard may not have any experience exploring rifts, but his situational judgment is more accurate than anyone else's. However, she also makes it clear that if anyone cannot agree with his decisions, they must immediately voice their objections. If even a single person objects, the entire team must retreat without hesitation. After finishing her explanation, Frances casually waves her hand and says with a smile that it is time for them to head into the sea. The moment she says that, Leonard immediately declares that he will go first. Galano quickly tries to stop him, asking why he is in such a hurry and telling him to wait for a moment. However, before anyone can do anything else, something unexpected happens. All of them suddenly begin moving toward the rift on their own as if an invisible force is pulling them in. The next instant, they find themselves falling through empty space. Esther looks around in complete confusion and asks if this is the sky, wondering aloud whether they are actually falling. Realizing the danger, Leonard immediately tells her to cast a spell. Esther apologizes for her momentary hesitation and instantly begins chanting. As soon as her magic activates, the vast body of water beneath them freezes over in an instant. A massive sheet of ice spreads across the sea, creating a safe landing point below. Leonard grabs Esther and lands safely on the frozen surface while the rest of the team also manages to make their descent without suffering any injuries. Looking around at their surroundings, Leonard comments that he never expected them to suddenly drop right into the middle of the sea the moment they entered the rift. Ninian immediately responds that they had nearly died as soon as they arrived and warns everyone that they need to stay sharp from this point onward because the rift is clearly more dangerous than they had anticipated. Just then, Ninian's gaze shifts toward the distance. Something catches her attention across the sea. Her expression instantly becomes serious as she focuses on the approaching presence. Without wasting even a second, she raises her voice and warns everyone directly, telling them that something is coming. A short while later, the monsters that had been approaching from the distance finally came into view. They were sea orcs, fierce creatures armed with various weapons, and the moment they got close enough, they launched a direct assault on the group. Leonard reacted instantly. Drawing his sword, he intercepted their attacks with flawless precision and completely neutralized the incoming strikes before they could cause any harm. As he observed the battlefield, he calmly assessed the situation in his mind, estimating that there were roughly a few dozen of them. At the same time, all of the sea orcs continued rushing forward, charging toward the group from multiple directions in an attempt to overwhelm them through sheer numbers. Seeing their movements, Ninian quickly realized what they were trying to do and asked if they were attempting to surround them. Meanwhile, Galano and the others had already begun fighting as well, and a full battle broke out. Between the expedition team and the sea orcs, weapons clashed. Water splashed across the frozen surface, and the sound of combat echoed throughout the area. While fighting off the monsters, Galano shouted that the creatures were not particularly strong on their own, but the team was at a disadvantage while fighting on top of the sea. He then asked how much longer it would take before they reached the island. Hearing this, Esther replied that she needed 5 more minutes. However, before she could continue focusing on her magic, a sea orc suddenly emerged from behind her and attempted to attack. The creature never got the chance. Leonard instantly eliminated it before it could touch her, and then firmly instructed everyone to leave the defense to those two. Turning toward Esther, He told her to focus entirely on the spell and hurry with the magic. As Leonard began moving forward across the battlefield, Galano watched him in disbelief and shouted in surprise, asking if he could actually run on water. Ninian, who had already become accustomed to Leonard's unusual abilities, simply looked at him and openly admitted that he was always full of surprises. While advancing at incredible speed, Leonard continued analyzing the situation in his mind. He concluded that if they fought the Sea Orcs one by one, the enemy would eventually gain the advantage through numbers. Instead, the best strategy was to crush their leader and completely destroy their morale. With that thought in mind, he accelerated even further and headed straight toward the source of command among the enemy forces. Before long, Leonard found himself face to face with a much larger Sea Orc than the others. This monster was clearly different from the rest and carried a massive chain weapon in its hands. The moment Leonard saw it, he immediately recognized it as the one he had been looking for. Soon afterward, the battle between them began. The enormous Sea Orc swung its chain weapon repeatedly, unleashing one relentless attack after another. The heavy chains cut through the air with tremendous force as the creature attempted to crush Leonard through sheer power. Yet despite the intensity of the assault, Leonard calmly blocked every single strike with his sword, refusing to give the monster even the slightest opening. As the fight continued, the tide slowly began to shift. At a crucial moment, Leonard cleverly wrapped the chains around his sword, using the enemy's own weapon against it. Then, with perfect timing, he drove his sword deep into the ground beneath him. In an instant, the entire situation turned against the Sea Orc. Its weapon was now restrained, and the advantage it had relied on had completely disappeared. The monster immediately realized how bad its position had become and understood that the battle was no longer under its control. It knew very well that the situation had suddenly become dangerous for it. Right in the middle of this tense confrontation, Leonard raised his voice and called out to Galano. As soon as Leonard called out to him, Galano immediately stepped forward and responded as if he had already understood the plan without needing any further explanation. He confidently declared that he knew what Leonard wanted and jokingly added that he should not throw his spear recklessly, right? The very next moment, Galano unleashed a single devastating attack. His spear shot forward with overwhelming force, and the impact was so tremendous that the large Sea Orc's entire body was blown apart instantly. The monster did not even have a chance to resist. In a single strike, the enemy leader was completely annihilated. With their leader dead, the remaining Sea Orcs lost all cohesion. The battle that had seemed dangerous only moments earlier ended almost immediately. After dealing with the enemy force, the group finally reached the shore and stepped onto solid ground. Having successfully eliminated the scouting party, they began moving deeper into the island while remaining alert for any signs of danger. Looking back at what had just happened, Esther could barely hide her amazement. She commented that the enemies had been wiped out in an instant. The speed with which the battle had ended left a strong impression on her. Ninian listened to Esther's words and nodded before pointing out that they had successfully dealt with the Sea Orc scouting party. However, she quickly shifted her attention to the next problem and asked where they should go from there. The mission was far from over, and the real objective of their exploration still lay somewhere ahead. Yet before anyone could answer her question, something suddenly caught her attention. Ninian's eyes widened as she looked ahead, and her expression immediately changed. In the next moment, she shouted Leonard's name at the top of her lungs. The urgency in her voice was impossible to miss. Everyone instantly turned toward him. At that very moment, something strange was happening to Leonard. His body had suddenly become tense, and an intense feeling was washing over him. As he stood there, he could feel his heart pounding heavily inside his chest. It was not fear, nor was it excitement. It felt more like a warning. Deep within himself, he sensed that his instincts were desperately trying to tell him something. In his mind, Leonard could only think of one thing. His heart was trying to warn him about something. Somewhere deep within this island, hidden beyond their sight and far from where they currently stood, an enormous threat was waiting. The feeling was so intense that he could not ignore it. Every instinct he possessed was sounding an alarm. A great disaster was lurking somewhere within the island. We then see him suddenly clutching his chest, his expression turning serious as a powerful sensation washes over him. In a tense voice, he mutters to himself, "Then I have to stop it. Is it inside that cave? This is bad." In terms of pure strength, it's probably even more dangerous than Conrad when he used the secret elixir. The weight of those words makes it clear that whatever is waiting ahead is far beyond an ordinary threat. He realizes that the source of the terrifying power is close, and if his instincts are correct, they are about to face an enemy unlike anything they have encountered before. At that moment, Galano comes running toward him in a panic, calling out loudly, "What happened to you?" Before long, the rest of the team gathers around him, all wearing worried expressions as they wait for an explanation. Looking at everyone, he calmly says, "It's nothing major. but there's something we need to discuss. I found the location of the rift's medium. After hearing that, Esther's eyes widen in surprise as she immediately responds, "A medium? You mean the substance generating the rift, right? There's no way it should be that easy to find." Her disbelief is understandable, because locating the very source of a rift is supposed to be an incredibly difficult task. However, he simply looks back at her and replies, "I don't know the reason, but I can feel it. If we go there, we will definitely encounter the Guardian of the Rift. That's why it's completely fine if we return to Fran for now. If even one person objects, the operation will be aborted." That was Fran's order. His voice remains calm and steady, making it clear that he has no intention of forcing anyone into such a dangerous battle. The decision will be made only if every single member is willing to move forward. Without the slightest hesitation, Ninian steps forward and confidently declares, "I want to go." Rather than targeting small fry where every shot is guaranteed to hit, I want to see if my arrows will work against strong enemies. There is no fear in her eyes, only excitement and determination to test her skills against a truly powerful opponent. Almost immediately, Galano grins and joins in as well, saying, "Of course I'm going to." Putting your life on the line is what makes it a real fight. As everyone silently considers the decision, Esther is lost in her own thoughts. I'm a scholar. There's no reason for me to go out of my way to risk my life. But after a brief moment of hesitation, she smiles to herself and finally says, "It can't be helped. I've always been interested in rifts. If we succeed, I'll definitely brag about it to my master." Although she isn't a frontline fighter, her curiosity as a scholar is simply too strong to ignore. The chance to witness the source of a rift with her own eyes is an opportunity she cannot bring herself to walk away from. Seeing that no one has backed down, Leonard gives a faint smile. Pleased that everyone has made their choice, the entire team then begins following him deeper into the mysterious cave. Before moving any farther, Leonard glances back at everyone and asks, "Is everyone prepared? It's going to be a tough fight." His calm but serious warning reminds the group that the real battle is only just beginning. After traveling much deeper into the cave, the surroundings suddenly change. The rough stone passages open into a massive ancient structure that looks nothing like the rest of the rift. The place resembles an enormous, forgotten temple, with towering pillars, worn stone walls, and an eerie silence hanging in the air. Looking around in amazement, Galano says, "It's like a temple. To think there was a place like this inside a rift." Even Esther can't hide her uneasiness as she carefully observes the mysterious ruins. It's somewhat creepy. It feels like something could jump out at any moment. No sooner do those words leave her mouth than her fear becomes reality. She suddenly notices movement in the darkness, her eyes widening as monsters emerge from the shadows. Startled, she immediately shouts, "And right as I say that, something's coming out? Everyone be careful! It's an ambush!" Without wasting a second, the monsters charge toward the group at incredible speed, filling the ancient temple with deafening roars. Leonard instantly reacts, cutting down one of the charging monsters with a single powerful strike before shouting orders to his teammates. "Galano, don't let a single one pass through here." Bursting with confidence, Galano grips his weapon tightly and replies, "Leave it to me." Leonard then quickly turns toward the next threat and commands, "Ninian, take out the sniper on top of the pillar." The battle erupts across the temple as every member of the team immediately carries out their assigned role. Ninian begins firing arrow after arrow with incredible precision, eliminating distant enemies and keeping the monsters from closing in. Galano stands at the front line, desperately blocking the endless wave of attackers with all his strength. However, as more and more monsters continue pouring into the temple, the pressure becomes overwhelming. Fighting with everything he has, Galano shouts at the top of his lungs, "There are too many of them. I can't hold them off alone. Is there no other way?" As the fierce battle continues, Esther finds herself completely overwhelmed by the situation. Watching the monsters swarm dangerously close to her teammates, she hesitates and thinks to herself, "I can use magic, but they're far too close. If I cast it now, my allies will get caught in the crossfire. What should I do?" She knows she has the power to wipe out a large number of enemies, but the risk of injuring her own companions keeps her from acting. Caught between fear and responsibility, she freezes for a brief moment, unable to make a decision. Then, a calm and confident voice reaches her. "Esther, there is no need to hesitate." The sudden voice startles her, and she quickly turns around in surprise. At that very moment, Leonard appears beside her just as he always does when his teammates need him the most. While effortlessly cutting down another monster, he looks at her and says, "You should trust your allies here. A magic that becomes more effective the larger the enemy horde. You have one, don't you?" His words instantly remind Esther of the spell she has been holding back. Only one name echoes through her mind, Chain Lightning. The moment she realizes what Leonard is asking of her, her hesitation disappears. Trusting her teammates to withstand the danger, she prepares to unleash her strongest area of effect spell. Looking toward the front line, Esther raises her voice and calls out, "Mr. Galano!" This will sting a little, all right? Completely surrounded by monsters and struggling to hold them back, Galano doesn't even hesitate. Before shouting back, "I don't care what it is at this point, as long as it peels these big bastards off me," even while fighting for his life. He lets out a confident grin and adds, "Come on. Let's see just how much of a sting it packs." Hearing his response, Esther finishes preparing her magic. The mana around her surges violently as the spell reaches its peak. In the very next instant, she releases chain lightning. Brilliant bolts of electricity explode across the battlefield, jumping from one monster to another in an endless chain. The lightning tears through the entire horde with incredible speed, striking every enemy in its path. Within moments, every single monster caught in the attack is completely wiped out, leaving the once chaotic battlefield silent. Looking down at the mountain of defeated monsters beneath his feet, Galano lets out a satisfied laugh and confidently declares, "These bugs," with the immediate threat eliminated. The entire team regroups around Leonard and continues moving deeper into the ancient temple. As they walk forward, Leonard calmly shares another lesson with his companions, saying, "When fighting a large number of enemies, you must consider your own role." After the fierce battle finally comes to an end, we see the battlefield covered with the dead bodies of the defeated monsters. Looking at the aftermath, Leonard calmly continues explaining his strategy. Because a single, highly effective and powerful move can turn the tide of battle, his words perfectly describe what everyone has just witnessed. One well-timed and devastating attack had completely changed the flow of the fight, allowing the team to overcome an overwhelming number of enemies. Hearing this, Galano lowers his eyes and looks at his own hands before saying, "About that lightning just now. Maybe because it spread out in an instant, I didn't take that much damage." Esther immediately understands what he means and replies, "I see. If it's a highly capable person like you, Mr. Galano, you're perfectly fine against this level of magic." Leonard nods in agreement before continuing. "Coordination like that is important. We will proceed further and just like this. We are steadily getting closer to the rifts." Medium. Encouraged by their successful teamwork, the entire group resumes their journey deeper into the mysterious temple, carefully advancing while staying alert for whatever may be waiting ahead. As they continue walking, faint traces of lightning still linger across the ancient stone walls, reminding everyone of the battle that had just taken place. Looking around the area, Galano says, "Looks like this area is mostly cleared out." For a brief moment, it feels as though they have finally reached a peaceful section of the temple. However, that feeling doesn't last long. Ninian suddenly notices something unusual ahead, and the expression on her face changes instantly. Realizing that something is wrong, she quickly signals everyone to stay completely silent. The entire group immediately stops moving and carefully looks toward the darkness in front of them. Standing there is an enormous monster radiating an overwhelming aura, its presence alone making it obvious that this creature is on an entirely different level from every enemy they have faced so far. This time, however, Esther doesn't allow fear to take control of her. Instead, she calmly begins gathering mana while preparing her magic and chants. "What on earth? Sound the alarm and rage like a storm." At the same time, she thinks to herself, that guy is undoubtedly the guardian of the rift. Right now, while it's engrossed in prayer, is the perfect chance. Believing that the guardian is completely focused on its prayer and unable to react, she decides to seize the opportunity and launch a surprise attack before it can defend itself. But the guardian's senses are far sharper than anyone expected. The instant it detects Esther's hostile intent, it abruptly opens its eyes and rushes toward her at terrifying speed, intending to kill her before she can finish casting her spell. Even as the gigantic monster charges directly at her, Esther doesn't move a single step from her position. She remains completely focused on completing her magic, placing her full trust in her companions instead of trying to save herself. Just as the Guardian's devastating attack is about to strike Esther, Leonard suddenly dashes forward without the slightest hesitation and intercepts the blow himself. A violent impact shakes the entire chamber, and a large amount of blood splashes across Esther's face, leaving her momentarily stunned. Standing directly in front of the Guardian, Leonard calmly says, "You aren't the only one aiming for a surprise attack." The two now stand face to face, their overwhelming fighting spirit colliding in the center of the ancient temple. A tense silence fills the air before the Guardian unleashes another crushing attack with incredible force. This time, even Leonard cannot completely withstand the monster's terrifying strength. The impact sends him violently, sliding backward across the stone floor, until he finally crashes to a stop. Blood pours from his mouth as he struggles to remain standing, making it painfully clear that the Guardian of the Rift is a monster whose power far exceeds anything the team has encountered before.